This video continues with Chapter 21, Osborn Bioindustry Building. Marvel, Awakening the Universe. Chapter 21, Osborn Bioindustry Building. Chapter 21, Osborn Bioindustry Building. Please continue reading. The next day, Hawk got up early, put on his clothes and shoulder bag, then took the documents given to him by Mrs. Snow and went out to catch the subway. He originally planned to take the bus. Well known. The New York City subway is hard to describe. Unfortunately, Hawk discovered that there was no direct bus from his new apartment to the Osborn Bioindustrial Building. If he took the bus, he would need to transfer 3 times. If you calculate it this way, you might as well take the subway. At least when you take the subway, if you have no morals, you can ride it for free. In a word, you can jump over the barriers at the subway ticket gates, and even if you don't skip your ticket, the transportation fee is still cheaper than taking the bus. So Hawk decided to just take the subway. Only, he regretted it as soon as he got on the subway. Smelly it stinks. The various colorful smells coming from all directions made Hawk close his sense of smell at almost lightning speed. But if it was just the bad smell, it would be fine. There are also many people doing things in the carriage. A hippie was holding a guitar and howling, dreaming of becoming a great musician one day. Not far away, a black woman who looked like a tank from any angle had a golden python wrapped around her neck. God knows how she brought this thing in. But that's not the point. As we all know, if we take stock of the places in New York City where the most thieves occur, the subway cars will definitely be on the list. Just then, a dark-skinned guy with a hood on his head set his sights on Hawk. His intuition told him that Hawk was a subway rookie. The so-called subway rookies refer to those passengers who do not take the subway very often and do not understand the dangers of subway cars and the unpredictable human heart. These passengers may not be very wealthy, but they are definitely the easiest prey, so they are defined as subway rookies by their peers in the stealing industry. Soon, Zio-Hai pretended to reach out to adjust his earphones, shook his head, and hummed a song to himself as he came behind Hawk. Next second, the moment Zio-Hai lowered his right hand, which was adjusting his headset, a folding knife was instantly drawn, intending to slash at Hawk's shoulder bag. At this time, Hawk, who was facing away from Zio-Hai, suddenly seemed to lose his balance, stumbled, and took a few steps back. Zio-Hai, who was standing behind Hawk intending to make a move, did not expect this scene. The handle of the folding knife that he had just taken out and had not yet adjusted was directly reversed by Hawk's impact, and with a thud, it directly pierced through Zio-Hai's wrist. What? Zio-Hai let out a scream, his eyes wide as he gasped for breath at the folding knife embedded in his wrist. Blood dripped from the wound on his wrist onto the floor of the carriage, with a paw sound. The people around the carriage were startled by Zio-Hai's scream, and then they quickly looked away after seeing Zio-Hai's skin color with a hole in his wrist. The subway just stopped at the station. The passengers around all stood up and left the car at the same time. No one gasped, no one cared, and no one went up to ask if Zio-Hai needed medical help or anything like that. Hawk also followed the crowd out of the car. From beginning to end, he didn't turn his head to look at Zio-Hai. After walking out of the car, Hawk felt the 1, 2, or 3 resentful glances cast at his back from behind, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. He was kind enough. If this wasn't a subway, but some remote area or an alley with few cameras, he would have been able to scatter the ashes of the little black man who tried to steal his ashes. Didn't you see that he was wearing all these cheap goods, which together cost no more than $50? He is so poor, why the hell does he come to steal? Is there any royal law? Are there any laws? And also, Gwen. Walking out of the subway station, Hawk, who had been feeling confused and upset about how he almost encountered a pickpocket on the subway, saw Gwen standing not far away, just downstairs of the Osborn Bioindustrial Building, seemingly waiting for someone. Gwen was looking around at the door when her eyes suddenly caught sight of Hawk across the street. Her eyes immediately lit up, and she raised her right hand to Hawk, waving quickly. "Are you waiting for me?" Hawk was slightly stunned. then took advantage of a gap in traffic to quickly cross the road. The Battle of New York took place half a month ago. Now, half a month has passed, and there is no trace of the alien invasion in Manhattan. That's the beauty of money. The battle in New York ended in the morning, and repair work on the damaged buildings in Manhattan, especially Wall Street, began at noon. At that time, the exterior wall of the Osborn bioindustrial building also suffered severe damage. But at the moment, there is no sign that Osborn's industrial building was penetrated by the Chitauri during the Battle of New York. Hawke looked up at the Osborn Biotech building, which was as tall as the Stark Industries building 5 blocks away, then looked back at Gwen, who seemed to be waiting for him at the door. "Are you waiting for me?" "Of course." Unlike her school attire, Gwen wore a long ponytail today and a white lab coat, the standard for researchers. She smiled and said, "How can I find out your secret if I'm not waiting for you here?" Hawke heard this and shook his head in confusion. "I have no secrets." "No, you do. I'll find it." Gwen said this with a serious face, and then her serious little face regained its smile and said to Hawke, "Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Mrs. Snow called me this morning and forgot you didn't have a cell phone and you didn't have an Osborn access card. She was worried that you couldn't even get through the gate of Osborn, so she called me and asked me to take you in to find that." Gwen paused and looked at Hawke. "By the way, what's the name of the person you're looking for?" "Max Dillon." Hawke revealed the name of the future super-villain Electro, now a super little-known engineer. Gwen's expression was stunned. "Yes, that's him. Come on, I'll take you to the bioelectrical engineering department." "It is good." Hawke didn't refuse. Gwen then put her hands in her pockets, shook her ponytail, turned around gracefully, and led Hawke to the card swiping area. After entering, she said a few words to the security guard beside her. The security guard looked at Hawke in the direction of Gwen's finger, then nodded and manually opened the gate. Gwen thanked the security guard after Hawke came in. Soon, Gwen led Hawke to the bioelectrical engineering department on the first floor of the annex building with ease. End of this chapter, Chapter 22, The Bottom Line That Was Destined to Be Broken. Chapter 22, The Bottom Line That Was Destined to Be Broken. Please read on. Hawke, take a look at the data. 108. Hawke, I need to go to the SL lab. Please collect the information on my desk for me. No problem. Huo. Today is Hawke's 20th day working as a summer intern at Osborn Bioindustries. But he hadn't found the opportunity to go to Dr. Connor's laboratory yet. Because in the past 20 days, let alone going to Dr. Connor's laboratory, he hasn't even left the door of the electrical engineering department. I am busy from the moment I get off work until the moment I leave. I am either helping people look at data or on my way to help people look at data. And like now, helping people tidy up the documents on the desk. Hawke watched the engineer stand up and leave in a hurry, then walked towards the engineer's desk. Although he had been in Osborn for 20 days and had not yet had the opportunity to go to Dr. Connor's laboratory, he was not in a hurry. On the one hand, good food is never too late. On the other hand, it's because it's busy here, but the salary is really high. The weekly salary is $800, and there is a cafeteria on the 18th floor with buffets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Although Hawke had the idea of robbing a bank last month, he didn't put it into action. The most important thing. Although the bottom line is meant to be broken, before Hawke broke it, he still wanted to avoid breaking it in advance if possible. Because he is afraid. Hawke didn't know what he would become after breaking his bottom line. Well known. Time travelers have always been creatures with particularly flexible moral bottom lines, and they are inherently indifferent to everything and everyone. Hawke is no exception. This is also the reason why he never socializes, because sometimes when he looks at others, he always feels like he is looking at an NPC. How should I put it? I feel like everyone else is drunk, but I am the only one sober. The reason why he is still willing to continue to follow the rules after awakening his microcosm is actually very simple. The education he received in his previous life told him that to be a good person, I don't expect you to be a good person, but don't be a bad person. This is why Hawk still lives a relatively poor life after awakening his microcosm. If it were any other time traveler, he would probably awaken his microcosm on the first day and announce to the world on the second day that those who obey me will prosper, and those who defy me will perish. Of course, the most important point may be that he is kind, pity. Hawk felt that this bottom line would have to be broken soon, no matter how reluctant he was. But no matter what, before that, he was still willing to abide by the bottom line. Hawk, who had been working for 10 days and was familiar with the rhythm of the bioelectrical engineering department, quickly sorted out the scattered documents on the engineer's desk, then carried the documents to the filing cabinet and put them away in order. Just then, the office phone rang. "Hugo, I'll pick it up." Hawk answered in advance, walked over and picked up the phone. Electrical Engineering Department. "Hey, Hawk," a familiar voice came from the other end of the phone. Hawk raised an eyebrow. Gwen. He hadn't seen Gwen since she brought him to the Bioelectrical Engineering Department to report 10 days ago. After all, he is busy. Gwen is busier. Even though Hawk was now in the Bioelectric Engineering Department, he had heard that Dr. Connors had been conducting experiments like a madman these days. He wasn't even using individual mice anymore. He was using boxes. Exaggerate. Gwen hummed on the other end of the phone. "It's me. By the way, our lab just had an unstable voltage. Dr. Connors asked you to send someone over to take a look." "Okay, right away." Hawk hung up the phone and told the head of engineering department about the incident. The 50-year-old, completely bald and seemingly undemanding supervisor surveyed the empty office. "Every lab is reporting unstable voltage today. I think it's the resistor again. We just replaced it yesterday. Forget it. You take Hawk with you to Dr. Connors' lab and help them get a new resistor." Hawk followed his supervisor's gaze and looked at the future Electro, who was not far away. He had a silly expression and dark skin, and he looked like an honest man. Yes. Honest person. Max Dillon is really an honest man, not at all like other black people who are sneaky and cunning. Hawk had truly seen it during those 20 days, and if the Bioelectrical Engineering Department had an award for a hard-working worker, Max Dillon was the undisputed winner. If Max Dillon had a little political acumen, he wouldn't just work blindly. As a result, his own supervisor doesn't even remember his name. However, Max himself didn't seem to care about it. Perhaps he was used to being called that person, so after hearing the supervisor's order, he just nodded and turned to go to the warehouse to get the parts. After a while, Hawk, who was standing at the entrance of the Bioelectrical Engineering Department waiting for the honest man Max, looked at Max, who was approaching, and said, "Mr. Dillon." Max's body shook violently, and his pupils seemed to shrink at this moment. His voice seemed to tremble as he looked at Hawk. "You know my name." Hawk smiled and said, "Of course, Mr. Dillon." Although he had no plans to communicate too much with the future Electro, it didn't mean he wasn't willing to establish a good relationship with the present Max. Be kind to others, and be kind to yourself. Hawk thought to himself, then looked at Max, who seemed to have tears in his eyes, and said, "Mr. Dillon, let's go. Dr. Connors' laboratory just called again to urge us to go." Max came back to his senses and nodded repeatedly. Yes, let's go." Hawk smiled inwardly and followed Max towards the elevator room not far away. "Finally, we can go to Dr. Connors' laboratory." After following Max into the elevator, Hawk looked at the interface showing upward movement and felt a little sad. During these 20 days, he had thought more than once about how to get to Dr. Connors' laboratory. "In the end, I failed it all. After all, this is not going to the vegetable market to buy vegetables. Do you really think that Osborn Bioindustry has invested heavily in the hope of developing regenerative technology and can just enter a laboratory that will monopolize the market in the future?" Later, when he calmed down and went with the flow, the opportunity to go to Dr. Connors' laboratory came. Really? Attitude is very important. Don't be impatient when doing anything. Hawk silently warned himself in his heart and completed the task of self-reflection for the day. Soon, the elevator door opens. Hawke, Gwen, who was already waiting in the elevator, had her eyes light up. Seeing Hawke coming out, she hurried forward and said, "Why are you so slow? Dr. Connors is getting mad." Hawke was about to speak. Gwen had already taken control and hurriedly pulled him towards the laboratory. Hawke was stunned, but at the same time, he looked at the laboratory not far away. My heart couldn't help but move. End of this chapter, Chapter 23, Gamanion finally appears. Chapter 23, Gamanion finally appears, bonus chapter this weekend. Please read on. Dr. Connors' regeneration laboratory is located on the 21st floor of the Osborn bioindustry building. The entire laboratory is filled with a wide variety of instruments. Some instruments look very valuable just by looking at their appearance. However, what attracted Hawke's attention most was the stone placed in a transparent box in front of him, which he saw through the glass. Hawke didn't know what kind of stone it was, but his intuition told him that this was what he was looking for. Hawke's mind moved, and he looked at Gwen beside him. "What is that?" "What?" Gwen was stunned at first and withdrew her gaze from Max Dillon, who was repairing it. She looked in the direction of Hawke's finger and then looked at Hawke. "Oh, that gamma rays." "Gamma?" Still rays, a question mark appeared in Hawke's head again, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Although my physics grades are not as good as yours, they are not bad either. When will this gamma ray thing turn into stone?" Gwen smiled. "But..." She thought for a moment, then looked around. As if to make sure the other researchers weren't paying attention, she lowered her voice and said to Hawke, "Do you remember when the Hulk wreaked havoc in New York City in September 2009? Hawke was slightly stunned, then nodded and said, "Of course I remember." How could he not remember? That day could be said to be the most unforgettable day in his life, since he traveled through time. It's not just because his plugin was launched on that day. There is another reason. In short, Hawke could not remember that day more clearly. Gwen shrugged. "Then you should know the abomination. He used the Hulk's blood to mutate into that ugly monster." Hawke nodded again, then seemed to think of something and looked at Gwen. "You mean to say that this stone is an abomination?" "Of course not. These stones were shipped from the Quantico military base." Gwen laughed and said, "The Hulk. Dr. Bruce Banner mutated because of the Gamma Lab explosion, but some strange changes seem to have occurred during the explosion. These stones were dug out from the lab where the explosion occurred." Hawke was stunned. "Then you just mentioned hatred." "Oh." Gwen suddenly realized and shrugged. "I thought you didn't know that the Hulk is Bruce Banner. After all, you don't have a computer or a mobile phone." Gwen paused at this point, then thought of something and looked at Hawke. "Isn't it true that you haven't bought a phone card for the phone I gave you last time?" Hawke took out a phone that looked like an iPhone 4 from his pocket and said, "I bought it." Gwen had given him this phone when she brought him into work at Osborn 20 days ago. He didn't want it, but Gwen gave him a reason that was hard to refuse. Well known. Workers need to punch in. Osborn is no exception. Gwen didn't give him a chance to refuse. She stuffed the phone into his hand and turned away. Hawke took out his cell phone and shook it, then brought the topic back to the subject, looking at the stone in the glass laboratory that gave him a strange feeling. How did the rocks from Quantico get here? Because Dr. Connors' experiment also has the support of the military. Gwen explained. To be precise, most of the experimental projects funded by Osborn had military support, and some were even joint ventures with the military. After all, the relationship between Osborn Industries and the military has always been very close. At the beginning, Osborn Industries was just a food factory that made canned herrings. But when the war came, the then very young Norman Osborn saw the opportunity and immediately sold the canned herring production line and replaced it with a weapons and ammunition production line. Today, although Osborn Bioindustries no longer sells arms, it has always maintained a good cooperative relationship with the military. Like Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors' experimental project was a collaboration between Osborn and the military, but the laboratory was located at Osborn Bioindustries. After all, Dr. Connors was a military doctor before. After listening to Gwen's explanation, Hawke nodded in understanding. At this moment, in the laboratory behind the glass, an experimenter was fixing a bottle of unknown serum, and then operating the robotic arm to pick up the so-called gamma stone. What are you doing? Regeneration serum test. Lizard serum. Dr. Connors is trying to study lizards to find the secret of how they regenerate broken limbs. This isn't really a secret. After all, Dr. Connors' thesis is there. But most people are not optimistic about this. There are many reasons. Hawke didn't take a closer look. After all, whether before awakening his microcosm or now, he had no intention of going down the path of scientific research. So Gwen was no exception to Hawke knowing this, and nodded and said, Dr. Connors thinks that the combination of lizard serum and gamma radiation might be what he's been looking for. Hawke nodded, then looked at the stone held up by the mechanical arm. An idea struck him, and he looked at Gwen. Can I go in and take a look? He wanted to make sure. Hearing this, Gwen thought of the scene where Hawke was reading a paper in the library. You're not really interested in gamma rays that can turn people into monsters, are you? No, I'm interested in the gamma rays in this stone. Hawke shook his head and said that from a scientific point of view, gamma rays cannot be preserved. After all, gamma rays disappear as soon as they are emitted. What? This is the Marvel universe, not science. Okay, that's okay. Gwen thought about it, confirmed that she was simply taking Hawke to have a closer look at the progress of Dr. Connors' experiment without spoiling it, and nodded. Hawke was delighted, but as he followed Gwen in, he said to Max Dillon, who was doing maintenance over there, Max, I'm going in to see the magical stone. He didn't call him Mr. Dillon because Max didn't allow him to. It seemed that because he knew Max's name, Max treated him as a friend. Okay. It would be better if Max's skin color was a little lighter. Hawke thought to himself. Max, who was busy repairing something, turned around and smiled innocently. Okay, I'll be done with it soon. Hawke said thank you, then followed Gwen, who had swiped her card in front of him, into the laboratory. At this time, just as Hawke followed Gwen into the laboratory, his eyes were once again fixed on the gamma stone held by the robotic arm. Moment. A message came from his little universe. Is it? Is it? That's it. Gamanion. Happy third update, begging for collection, monthly votes, and follow-up reading. End of this chapter, Chapter 24, Sudden Accident. Chapter 24, Sudden Accident. Gently smash. Pooh, at the moment when the stone placed in the transparent control box was broken. A strange light that ordinary people could not observe with the naked eye, but Hawke could see, broke through the stone. At this moment, his little universe began to throb. It is clear. His little universe was telling him one thing. Gamanion. He found it. After absorbing the information transmitted by the microcosm, Hawke also understood what Gamanion was, and at the same time smiled speechlessly in his heart. The reason is simple. To put it simply, Gamanion, for unknown reasons, has changed from a gamma ray that cannot be stored at all to a gamma ray that can be stored. It was Gamanion. Okay. That sounds bullshit. But none of this mattered anymore. What mattered was that Hawke now knew where to find the Gamanion he needed. Quantico, the laboratory where Bruce Banner was exposed to a gamma ray explosion. After bringing Hawke in, Gwen, who was temporarily acting as a tour guide, looked at Hawke, who was staring at the broken stone, and subconsciously nudged Hawke with her elbow. Hawke came back to his senses and looked at Gwen. Clear eyes. Okay. What are you thinking about? Gwen frowned. You don't really want to become a monster like the Abomination, do you? She thought about Hawke's obsessed look just now, and always felt that Hawke didn't intend to be a human being. Hawke temporarily suppressed the idea of running to Quantico right now and shook his head. How is that possible? I was just wondering if Dr. Connors' experiment is about to succeed. Gwen was about to speak. At this time, Dr. Connors, who had just walked over to see Gwen bring someone in, heard this and interrupted. Scientific research is a road of constant trial and error. But it is true that I feel we are on the road to success. Gwen turned and greeted Dr. Connors as he approached. PhD. Curtis Connors. Connors, also wearing a white coat but with one arm, smiled and stretched out his left hand to Hawk. You are. Hawk looked at Dr. Connors's outstretched left hand and smiled as he extended his own. Hawk, I'm Gwen's classmate. I'm currently working as a summer intern in the bioelectrical engineering department. By the way, I came here with Mr. Dillon. I asked Gwen if she could give me a tour. Sorry to bother you, Doctor. Dr. Connors laughed. I just heard you talking to Gwen. Do you really think my experiment will succeed? Hawk smiled and said, I've read the doctor's thesis. It's clear that if the doctor's experiment is successful, it will definitely benefit mankind. This is not boasting, but fact. As long as Dr. Connors' regeneration experiment is successful, there will be no more disabled people in the world. Of course, we are talking about people with physical disabilities here. That's why Hawk said it would benefit mankind, not all mankind. But the premise of all this is that Dr. Connors can really develop a regeneration potion, rather than just tinkering with the lizard serum that can turn people into lizard men. But this is highly unlikely. The main reason why Dr. Connors became Dr. Lizard was because of the reminder from the Amazing Spider-Man. Although the Dr. Connors in front of us looks like Dr. Connors in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, there is no Amazing Spider-Man here. There is a spider spirit here. But he's currently working a summer job at the Daily Bugle and isn't likely to be here. And so, the probability of Dr. Connors here becoming Dr. Lizard is really not as high as the probability of Max Dillon, who is doing maintenance outside, becoming Electro next year. But Hawk kept his word. He did not say whether he believed it or not, but only said that if Dr. Connors' experiment was successful, it would benefit mankind. Dr. Connors was very pleased with this and laughed, but he didn't say anything else. However, as he left, he said to Gwen, can you tell your classmates about our current progress? It was rare to find someone who affirmed his experiment, and Gwen hadn't actually been involved in any core technology. The progress was public knowledge, so there was no risk of leaks. Gwen responded, and after Dr. Connors left, she stood next to Hawk again and whispered, Do you really think Dr. Connors' experiment can succeed? Hawk was watching the experimenter who had smashed the gamma stone walk to the centrifuge not far away. Hearing these words, he looked at Gwen beside him. Just as he was about to shake his head and say he didn't believe it, he seemed to notice something and looked up at the light bulb above his head. The light bulb on the laboratory roof flickered quickly. Next moment, there was a bang. As the light bulb exploded, the lights in the entire laboratory suddenly went out. Boom! Thick and greasy. Puff! Along with the sound of explosions and rapid exclamations coming from the darkness, Hawk instantly felt a sense of oppression towards Gwen. Hawk didn't have time to think about it, and almost subconsciously stretched out his right hand to block Gwen. Puff! Hawk felt the pain in his palm and frowned. At the same time, the emergency light in the laboratory quickly came online after the lights went out. The red emergency light made the cold laboratory look a little scary. In particular, everyone saw a corpse lying in a pool of blood. A female experimenter covered her bleeding neck and fell to the ground beside the broken centrifuge. Blood seeped through the gaps between her fingers and kept gurgling and bubbling out. A few little white mice were running around on the ground. Thick and greasy's IT. Mia. Jesus Christ. Mia. Everyone under the red emergency light looked at this scene. Their faces changed drastically, and then some of them ran out of the laboratory to call for help, while others ran towards the person who fell to the ground at the same time. Gwen's gaze fell on Hawk, who had retracted his right hand and placed it behind his back. Her eyes flickered as she turned sideways to face Hawk. Hands out. What? Hawk was slightly stunned. Gwen didn't say anything. She just grabbed Hawk's arm, took Hawk's right hand out from behind, and then pulled it apart. Into the eye. Hawk's right palm was intact, except for a patch of skin on the palm that looked like new growth. Gwen was stunned. Hawk smiled and retracted his right hand. "My hand is not as beautiful as yours." Gwen frowned and said nothing. At this moment, Osborn's medical staff and security ran in from outside and began to clear the area. Hawk took advantage of the chaos in the laboratory and left early with the somewhat dazed Max. Gwen stood outside the laboratory and continued to frown. She was sure she hadn't seen it wrong. Just now, when the lights dimmed, she clearly felt a sense of oppression as the air was squeezed coming towards her. However, this feeling of oppression came and went quickly, but she saw it clearly. At the moment when the feeling of oppression disappeared, a few drops of blood dripped into her sight. But Hawk's palms were fine. Wait a moment. Gwen seemed to have thought of something, her eyes lit up, and she walked to the door of the laboratory and looked at where she had just stood. On the ground, on the white floor, a few drops of blood are clearly visible. A little white mouse with a broken tail ran over there. After sniffing, it seemed as if its eyes lit up and it began to stick out its tongue to suck up the drops of blood. Shit. Gwen came back to her senses and quickly ran inside. End of this chapter. Chapter 25, A Beautiful Woman &039, S personal cell phone, and A Beautiful Woman &039, S personal comput. Chapter 25, Beauty using a mobile phone and Beauty using a computer. At night, on the rooftop of the new apartment. After boxing, Hawk pulled his shorts, sat down on the ground against the ventilation duct behind him, grabbed the Coke beside him, and took a big gulp. At this time, Hawk seemed to have thought of something, put the Coke aside, and opened his right palm. Into the eye. Gwen had seen a trace of what looked like new skin before, but now it had completely disappeared. After he awakened his microcosm, his strength, speed, and physique, these three basic qualities can be said to have completely transcended the realm of mortals. Without burning the microcosm, his strength can easily shatter boulders, destroy thick walls, and even bend steel. His speed, as long as he wants, he can reach the speed of sound. The same is true of his physique. Even without the protection of the holy clothes, he could withstand the powerful impact and blow that could kill ordinary people on the spot. Moreover, even if he was injured, his self-healing ability was far stronger than that of ordinary people, allowing him to recover from fatigue and minor injuries faster. That was the case with the fragment that was ejected from the high-speed spinning centrifuge today. If he had not taken action at that time, Gwen would have had no hope of survival under this fragment. If nothing unexpected happened, he would have been blown in the head by the fragment. But this is not the point. The point is, while Hawk was recalling the scene of his subconscious attack, he used his left hand to rub the place on his right palm where he felt the pain. Just as he was frowning, wondering what he was thinking, the cell phone beside him rang. Hawk came back to his senses, slightly stunned, and looked at his phone, which was ringing for the first time since he bought the phone card. Connected. Hey. Yes, it's me. Are you here? Okay, I'll be there soon. Hang up the phone. Hawk stood up from the ground, and with a whoosh, he disappeared from the spot. When he appeared again, he was already at the escape stairs. Then he went back to his new apartment through the window, opened his backpack, and took out $500 from it. His computer arrived. 10 minutes later, across the road from the entrance to the bridge park. Hawk came to the park entrance, looked around to see that there was no one around, took out his cell phone from his pocket, found the only number in the call log, and dialed it. Just then, the lights of a van parked not far away flashed. Hawk subconsciously looked towards the van. The driver's door of the van opened, and then an Asian woman with thick brown hair, who looked to be in her early 20s at most, walked out and waved her cell phone at Hawk. Hawk looked at the appearance of the Asian woman and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Sky, standing next to his Vancouver RV, looked at Hawk as he approached. Superman is not as good as me. Hawk nodded, yes. Upon hearing this, Sky didn't waste any words. He took out a notebook and handed it to Hawk. It's just like what I described when we chatted this afternoon. I've used it for 3 years and it's 90% new. I've already reconfigured the system. Please check it out. If there's no problem, you can pay. Hawk hummed and without saying anything like no thanks, took the computer. After all, this is a big item worth $500. If he wasn't a little embarrassed, he would have wanted to ask Gwen if she had any unused computers that she could give him. Again, the bottom line is meant to be broken. Although this phone was forced upon him by Gwen, he finally accepted it. But Hawk thought about it and felt that men should be more reserved. But he never imagined that the seller he randomly found at the second-hand market, when he borrowed the office computer in the afternoon, was actually another well-known figure in the Marvel Universe. Sky, the future Quake. Hawk sighed in his heart as he checked the beautiful woman's personal computer that Sky had brought to sell. After confirming that it could boot up normally and run some of its own programs, he closed the computer and took out the $500 he had prepared from his pocket and handed it over. Sky took the 5 Franklins and examined them as well. After a while, Sky put away the $500, extended his hand to Hawk, and said with a smile, "It's a pleasure to work with you." Hawk switched the computer to his left hand and extended his right hand. Happy cooperation. No pleasantries were exchanged. Only buying and selling. After the transaction was completed, Sky got in his car without saying a word, started his van, and drove away with a buzzing sound. After returning to his new apartment, Hawk placed the computer Sky had bought for her own use on the folding table, and also put the cell phone Gwen had given him for her own use aside. Okay. If you compare them this way, Gwen is better. Wait a minute, what am I thinking? Hawk frowned again, shook off the distracting thoughts in his mind, and then connected the computer he bought from Sky to the mobile phone hotspot given by Gwen. Next step. Quantico. Hawk directly opened the satellite map page and located it at the coordinates of Quantico. Although some more confidential buildings and things are hidden on the satellite map. But it doesn't matter. Hawk only took a glance and saw a dilapidated building surrounded by iron sheets on the satellite map. It took him half an hour to confirm that the building was Dr. Bruce Banner's laboratory in Quantico. The internet is very developed now, especially after the exposure of the first generation of Avengers, not to mention that Bruce Banner was exposed once in 2009. And so, information about Bruce Banner's life, why he became the Hulk, and when he became the Hulk is all available on the internet. At the same time, gossip about Bruce Banner and Betty Ross's past relationship was also exposed. But that's not Hawk's focus. Hawk was in his new apartment, one hand on his chin, the other hand sliding on the touchpad of his computer, looking at the introduction of the Quantico military base and the satellite map on the screen. His eyes fell on the locked, abandoned laboratory, his eyes thoughtful. He felt that he might be about to break his bottom line early. No way. He has no money, and even if he did, Quantico probably wouldn't sell the Gamma Stone to him. But he also wanted the Gamma Stone. After all, it concerns the Holy Garment. So there was only one way before him. If you don't give it to me, then I can only rob it. But stealing the Gamma Stones from Quantico is different from stealing the vibranium from Wakanda. Let's say that, even if he stole Wakanda's vibranium, it would be fine even if it was exposed. It is a bit like as long as he dares to start a team fight, he will be automatically matched with teammates. At that time, the whole world will not cause trouble for him, but for Wakanda. It goes without saying that the 5 overlords will make Wakanda hand over the vibranium, and at the very least, they will make Wakanda agree to the UN garrison. So Hawk doesn't take Wakanda seriously at all. But robbing Quantico was different. But Gamma Stone. I am determined to win. Hawk's eyes flickered as he looked at the satellite map of Quantico on the computer screen. End of this chapter, Chapter 26, he died on the road before he had even started working. Chapter 26, he died on the road before he had even started working, the next day. Hawk was still thinking about the Gamma Stone he had placed at the Quantico military base as he took the subway to his summer job at Osborn Bioindustries. He has thought it through. If he wanted to rob the Quantico military base, there was only one way. Quick fight. Can't drag. After all, the place he wanted to attack was the Quantico military base, not any other place. The Federal Police Academy is over there. Even the famous Langley headquarters is there. Say something unpleasant. Going to rob Quantico is no different from stepping on the heads of the federal military, the FBI, and the CIA. But, even if it means stepping on the heads of the military, the FBI and the CIA, he will go. Gamma Stone. He is determined to win. But, everything will stand in advance, and nothing will be abandoned if you don't. I need to go to Quantico first and check out the area. At the very least, we need to conduct a field survey and plan an escape route. Hawke thought silently as he swiped his card, walked into the Osborn bioindustry building, and returned to the bioengineering department. Immediately afterwards, he was called into the supervisor's office. Max Dillon, the future Electro, is also there. The middle-aged, balding, seemingly indifferent supervisor now looked grim. After a moment's silence, he turned to Max Dillon and said, "From today on, you will go to the maintenance team." Max Dillon was stunned when he heard this. "Boss, I'm not finished yet." The supervisor interrupted Max Dillon, then looked at Hawke and sighed, "Hawke, you are fired, but you can get this week's salary." Hawke blinked. He was not as surprised as Max. Although he had guessed the reason, he still looked at the supervisor calmly. "Can I ask why?" "The accident in Dr. Connor's lab yesterday." "Really?" Hawke thought to himself. Max, who was standing by, heard this and said hurriedly, "Boss, what does the power outage have to do with us? Our biomass electricity has always been used to supply the building's daily electricity needs. For example, the electricity used for the equipment in each department is not." The supervisor covered his forehead and said, "All right, this isn't a discussion, this is a decision. You go out first and Hawke stays." Max froze in place, then looked at Hawke beside him. Hawke shrugged. "It's okay, Max." "All right." Max heard this and looked at the supervisor, as if he wanted to say something, but he opened his mouth, lowered his head, and walked out. After Max left the office, the supervisor sighed again and looked at Hawke. "I'm sorry, I can do everything I can to keep Max, but I can't keep you. You're very good, Hawke. If you have any requests, you can raise them and I will do my best to meet your needs." Hawke smiled and said, "It's okay. Just help me explain it to Mrs. Snow." His purpose of coming to Osborn Bioindustries was to find Gamanion. Now that Gamanion has been found, his purpose of coming here has been achieved. In that case, there is no point in staying in Osborn Bioindustries. But what he had thought about before was taking a leave, not resigning. After all, this summer job was found for him by Mrs. Snow through a favor. Mrs. Snow was a good person and had always taken good care of him, so he didn't want to let Mrs. Snow's kindness go to waste. "It's good now." He didn't even need to ask for leave. Hearing Hawke's request, the supervisor breathed a sigh of relief and nodded, saying, "That's for sure. In fact, I just finished speaking with Selena. After all, I know about this matter, you and that person." Hawke reminded the supervisor, who was frowning. "Max." "Yes, Max." The supervisor's brows relaxed, and he sighed, "This isn't your or Max's fault. I know that, but there's nothing I can do." Hawke also shook his head and smiled. In fact, as Max said, the electricity from the biopower department is mainly used to supply the daily electricity consumption of the building. After all, how much electricity can those electric eels generate in a day? Not to mention so many laboratories and so many large and power-consuming equipment. But some people are stupid. To put it bluntly, the cause of this incident was that a senior executive of Osborn felt that the burden of the biopower department could be greater, and this resulted in something being caused. As a result, now that something has happened, the senior executive is unwilling to take responsibility. Okay. It's bad, but it fits the image. It's that simple. Hawke didn't stay in the supervisor's office for long. He took his $800 salary for the week, patted his butt, and walked out of the Osborn bioindustrial building behind him. Hawk, wait. Just as Hawk was about to cross the street to take the subway back, Gwen chased him out of the building. Hawk turned around and looked at Gwen, who had chased after him. Mrs. Snow called you. Gwen stopped, put her hands on her knees, and took a few breaths. She had just received a call from Mrs. Snow and rushed down, but the people from the biopower department told her that Hawk had left. But it's okay. After Gwen calmed her breathing, she looked at Hawk's facial expression and said, "Are you okay?" Hawk shrugged, pretty good. He did not let Mrs. Snow down, and successfully withdrew from Osborn Bioindustry and went to Quantico. And I got a week's salary for nothing. Delicious. Hawk thought to himself, looking at Gwen, who looked worried, and grinned and said, "Don't worry, I'm really fine. My supervisor said that I can still come here to work during the winter vacation." The supervisor did say that. But he probably wouldn't come, but he didn't refuse either. What if don't use up all your strength, don't say all you want, leave some room for others so that you can meet again in the future? Hawk understood this point. Gwen heard this and looked at Hawk's expression, which didn't look fake. After confirming that Hawk was really okay, she nodded and asked, "So what are your plans next?" After all, there's still more than a month before school starts. Stay home and read some books. You know, there's only a little over a month left, and it's going to be hard to find a suitable summer job. Hawk shrugged and said so, then said, "Okay, you can go back soon, I'm really fine." Gwen nodded when she heard this. "Okay, then if you have time, let's go to the library to read together." Hawk was slightly stunned. Gwen once again didn't give Hawk a chance to speak. It seemed that after forcing Hawk's phone into her hand, she had found the right way to talk to Hawk. After saying this, she turned around, put her hands in her pockets, and walked back into Osborn Bioindustries. Hawk looked at Gwen, who was smiling and waving at him in front of the building, and couldn't help but frown. Next second, he turned and left. Business matters. Quantico, I'm here. Let go of my Gamanion. End of this chapter. Chapter 27, Hawk, who was thinking of robbing, was robbed. Chapter 27, Hawk, who was thinking of robbing, was robbed. 2:30 in the afternoon. The flight from New York landed smoothly at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport in Washington, D.C. After half an hour, Hawk, traveling light, walked out of the airport and came to a taxi. He opened the back door and got in. He told the young black man who turned his head to look at him from the driver's seat that he was staying at a motel in Quantico. The young black driver nodded, started the mileage, stepped on the accelerator, and drove away from the airport. Although the Marine Corps base and the FBI Academy are both in Quantico, it doesn't mean that ordinary people can't get there. Ordinary people simply cannot freely enter areas under military control. However, the town of Quantico itself, which is the outskirts of the base, is still open. Any self-disciplined person has extraordinary motivation, let alone a man like Hawk, who insists on punching 10,000 times a day for 1,000 consecutive days. Hawk's ability to act is also unprecedented. He had just come out of the Osborn Bioindustry building in the morning, and at noon, he rushed to the airport to buy a ticket for the fastest flight to Washington. Hawk didn't even go home to get himself a few changes of clothes. Fortunately, he had spent the entire night looking at the satellite map of Quantico and had a rough idea of what he would need to do if he wanted to go to Quantico to retrieve his Gamanion. Otherwise, Hawk, who had just got off the plane, would probably be like a headless fly, not knowing which way to go. Plan A. If you can go in quietly, go in quietly. But if we're discovered, we'll just switch to Plan B. Quick victory. Hawk, sitting in the back seat of the taxi, thought silently in his heart again, then regained his composure and turned to look at the scenery outside the window. Then, Hawk glanced discreetly at the driver in front of him while taking out his phone from his pocket, a phone he'd forgotten to restart after turning it off on the plane. The phone turned on quickly. Ding dong, the text message sound was received. Hawk raised his eyebrows and was about to unlock the car to see what spam messages the operator had sent this time when a deep voice rang out in the car, accompanied by a pitch-black gun muzzle pointed at him from the front. "Don't move, give me the phone." Hawk fell silent. "Who I am?" "I'm there." "What should I do?" "No. I was going to Quantico to rob. But how come I was robbed just after landing and before I even reached Quantico?" "Hey, it's still the Special Administrative Region after all. Is the security there worse than in New York City?" For an instant, Hawk's impression of Washington, D.C. reached a freezing point. The driver, looking through the rearview mirror at Hawk, who seemed frozen in the back seat, said in a deep voice, brandishing the black muzzle of his gun, "Don't move, give me your phone." Hawk came back to his senses. "Do you want me to stay still, or do you want me to give you my phone?" The driver was silent for a moment after hearing this. Next second, he seemed to be broken. "You, stop talking nonsense and put your phone away." Jingle bell. Just as the driver broke down and spoke, Hawk's phone rang. Gwen's. Hawk blinked at the only number left in his phone's address book. He only has one number saved in this phone. As he said before, there was no need for him to unplug his phone because he didn't need to call anyone and no one would call him. Except for Gwen. Hawk looked at Gwen's call, answered it directly, and put it to his ear. "Hey." The young driver broke down. He looked through the rearview mirror and saw Hawk, who ignored his equality device and answered the phone without any hesitation or even pretending, and his defense was completely broken. Next second, Zio High suddenly braked suddenly, then swung his body on the seat and leaned back. "I'm... Boom." "What?" On the other end of the phone, Gwen, who was about to speak, suddenly blinked when she heard a scream that seemed to come from Hawk. "Is someone screaming, Hawk?" "Yeah, there was a guy passing by who was showing a movie just now. Probably some violent action movie." "I guess so." The scream sounded exactly like the scream of someone's ribs being broken. Hawk bent down, one hand covering the mouth of Blackie, who was leaning against the console, while looking at the spot where he had hit Blackie's ribs. "Can you tell where the man was injured from the scream?" Gwen laughed from the other end of the line. "Of course, my dad is the sheriff. Let me tell you something, the new police officers may not be as professional as me." "I can see it." Hawk was speechless. What else can he say? He can only say that a top student is a top student. He learns things faster and better than others. At this time, Gwen's laugh was bright and hearty this time. "I was just teasing you. How is that possible?" "Okay, I'm serious. By the way, why is your phone turned off? I called you several times but couldn't get through." "What happened?" Hawk kept bending over, covering Zio High's mouth with one hand to prevent him from screaming and holding the phone with the other hand to talk to Gwen. "Go downstairs." "What?" "Dr. Connors knows you were fired and that you're the one taking the blame. He felt bad and prepared a gift for you, but you couldn't get through on the phone, so I came over anyway. Aren't you home?" Gwen, who had already driven her yellow Corolla to the downstairs of Hawk's new apartment building, pressed an envelope on the passenger seat with her hand while looking through the window at Hawk's new apartment building. After hearing that Gwen had arrived downstairs of his apartment, Hawk was silent for a second or two. Then he reacted. "Yes, I'm not home. How about you take it back and give it to me when school starts?" "I've already gotten off." Gwen closed the car door and walked towards Hawk's new apartment building while saying, "You are on the top floor of the apartment building close to the road, right? Your windows are open. I will go in through the escape stairs and take it straight home for you." Hawk was stunned. It's not surprising that Gwen knew where his home was. After all, she was there when he was filling out the application form and might have seen it. "But how did you know?" "I saw your shorts hanging by the window." You've been wearing those pants for 3 years, and if I remember correctly, they weren't shorts before. I think you changed them into shorts in 10th grade. Okay, that's it. I'll just drop you off at home and I'll be back soon." End of this chapter. Chapter 28, Hawk in the Photo, and Chapter 28, Hawk in the Photograph, and Hawk fell silent again as he listened to the dead tone coming from the other end of the phone. Next moment, his mind was racing. Hawk wasn't worried about Gwen going to his apartment. but he was quickly thinking about whether there was anything in his apartment that was inappropriate for children or should not be seen by Gwen. Not suitable for children. No. Forget about the video, he doesn't even have a poster, let alone a magazine or anything. The answer is that he is poor. He was too reluctant to even buy a phone card, let alone those expensive and time-consuming magazines. In the past few years, when he was full of energy, he usually chose to go to the rooftop and punch the air, and then go back to sleep when he was tired. As for things that shouldn't be seen by Gwen, it seems not. He wrapped the 5 Chitauri alien weapons tightly in the sheets and stuffed them under the bed in his bedroom. Gwen shouldn't find out. And so, forget it, let her be. Business matters. Think about it. Hawk regained his composure and put away his phone. The gentleness in his eyes that he had just shown when talking to Gwen disappeared completely, replaced by an extremely cold look. Zio-Hai, with his mouth covered, looked terrified. Hawk admired the fear in Zio-Hai's eyes, and the corners of his mouth slightly curved into a nice arc. Now, it's my turn to rob you. After hanging up the phone, Gwen put her phone back into her pocket and went directly to the escape stairs embedded in the outer wall of Hawk's new apartment, and then reached the top floor smoothly. Gwen moved aside the shorts that seemed to be made from casual pants and were hanging in front of the half-open window, then jumped into Hawk's apartment through the window. Look around. The living room is small. A second-hand sofa and a second-hand folding table with a laptop on it take up 2/3 of the space. But it's clean. It cannot be said to be spotless, but it can be said to be well organized. Gwen looked at the living room, and her first impression was comfort. She had never been to Hawk's previous apartment, and this was the first time she had seen this apartment. But, just as Gwen took the envelope that Dr. Connors had asked her to pass on to Hawk out of her pocket and placed it on the folding table, her gaze was drawn to the closed notebook on the folding table. Not because she was surprised that Hawk had a computer, but sticker on the computer case. It's so cute. Gwen looked at the girlish stickers on the notebook cover and couldn't help but laugh. She was a little curious about which girl sold Hawk this notebook. She never thought that the stickers on the notebook were put by Hawk, nor did she even think about which girl gave her the notebook. Impossible. It is absolutely impossible. Because no one knows Hawk better than she does. She had no doubt that if she had spoken to Hawk after handing him the phone, he would have returned it to her. So just in case, Gwen simply didn't meet Hawk for those 10 days. Gwen thought to herself, then looked away, glanced at the envelope on the folding table, and turned to leave. Just as she turned around, the open sun-protective jacket slid along, creating a gust of wind that lifted the envelopes folded on the table. The envelope took off and wobbled as it drifted into the bedroom next to the living room. Gwen instinctively went over, bent down, and picked up the envelope that had almost been blown under the bed. As she stood up, a faint green light shone from under the bed, which Gwen caught in the corner of her eye. Her movement of picking up the envelope suddenly froze. Gwen looked under the bed. A tightly wrapped bed sheet instantly came into view. But this bed sheet is definitely not a good thing. At least it's not dark. The faint green light at this moment flickered through the bed sheets, just like the rhythm of breathing. But the light is dim. Even though it was daytime, Gwen would definitely not have seen it if she hadn't just happened to catch a glimpse of the light source out of the corner of her eye. What is this? Gwen squatted down and leaned over to look under the bed. When she saw this scene, her eyebrows couldn't help but raise. Gwen was thinking about this, and just as she was about to stand up while grabbing the envelope she had just picked up, her eyes moved upwards, and she saw a slightly broken picture frame placed next to the bedside table. There was a photo in the broken frame. The background of the photo is Times Square, and the protagonists in the photo are a young man and woman who look about 14 years old, with their clothes a little worn and white. A man Gwen knew. Hawk. Hawk is smiling happily in the photo. Gwen had never seen Hawk smile like that in her memory. But this girl in the photo, Gwen frowned again, put the envelope aside, and grabbed the photo on the bedside table to look at it. This photo was probably taken when Hawk was 14 years old, not long after he started school. Gwen looked at the photo and mentally confirmed the time it was taken, because Gwen recognized the pants Hawk was wearing in the photo. It was the Hawk pants she just complained about. She had worn them for 3 years and they were obviously too small, but she couldn't bear to throw them away. Instead, she turned them into shorts. Correct. It's the shorts that are still hanging by the window. But who is this girl? Gwen frowned and looked at the girl in the photo. Her skin looked a little pale, but she was also smiling happily and holding Hawk's arm tightly with both hands. Sister, but I haven't heard Hawk mention it. Gwen caught the similarity between Hawk's eyebrows and the girl next to him in the photo, and her heart moved as she thought so. But she thought about it carefully and found that Hawk had never mentioned this matter. Passed away. Gwen thought of the most likely possibility that Hawk had never mentioned, thought about it, then put down the photo frame in her hand, put it back on the bedside table, then stood up and walked outside. Just as she walked back to the living room, she suddenly reacted, slapped her head, and turned around again. She forgot to take the envelope back. What? Where's the envelope? Gwen walked back into the bedroom and was slightly stunned when she saw the envelope on her floor, which was now gone. Then she seemed to think of something and squatted down again. Really? The envelope had slipped under the bed, probably because of the breeze created when she stood up just now. Gwen looked at the envelope that had slipped under the bed, stretched out her arm, and reached inside. Soon, her fingertips hooked the envelope. At the same time, her fingertips also touched the tightly wrapped bed sheet. The moment her fingertips touched the bed sheets, a feeling of touching metal spread from Gwen's fingertips to her mind. End of this chapter. Chapter 29, Hawk opens the killing valve. Chapter 29, Hawk opens the killing valve, remote town 50 kilometers north of Quantico. Hawk had seen the terrain near Quantico on a satellite map, so he had a rough idea of how to drive to Quantico from the airport. So just now, when the young black man drove the car away from his expected route, Hawk became suspicious. His memory was already good, and after awakening his microcosm, his memory also made a qualitative leap. Hawk got out of the car and looked around. Remote. Muddy. Okay. It's a good place to rob, kill, and then bury the bodies. No wonder Zio-Hai drove the car here. Hawk thought to himself. Behind. Zio-Hai in the car had a bruised face and nose, but his life was not in danger. He was just still screaming. Hawk didn't kill him. At least not yet. After a while, Hawk turned around, opened the car door, and with a yank of his right hand, pulled the groaning driver out of the car with one hand, then tossed him onto the muddy dirt road that was still wet from the rain. After being thrown to the ground, the driver felt dizzy and disoriented, but driven by his survival instinct. He quickly got up, knelt in front of Hawk, and pleaded in a trembling voice, "Please, don't kill me, please, don't kill me. I know I was wrong." Hawk looked at the driver who had been so arrogant just moments before, and now looked so disheveled. The voice is cold. You don't know you're wrong, you just know you're going to die. The driver froze, his pleading voice trembling even more. Hawk narrowed his eyes and said, "Give me a reason not to kill you." The driver was slightly taken aback. Next second, he raised his bruised head and looked at Hawk, his voice hurried, searching for hope of survival. "I'll give you my car and my money. Oh, I have money, so I can give you my money too." "That's not enough. Even if I kill you, your car and money will still be mine." Hawk shook his head expressionlessly. "Think again. You can't kill me. If you kill me, you'll also be wanted. As long as you don't kill me, don't worry. I promise I won't tell anyone about this. Please, don't kill me." The driver spoke hurriedly, his eyes revealing an infinite desire to live. Upon hearing this, Hawk glanced at the driver, then lowered his eyes in thought. He seemed to be pondering just how credible the driver's statement was. The driver kneeling in front of him was secretly delighted when he saw Hawk's gaze leave him. The driver continued to plead in his voice, while carefully moving his right hand toward his lower back. Next second, the driver drew a folding knife from his waist with his right hand, then let out a strange cry before suddenly leaping up, his expression ferocious, and lunging at Hawke in front of him, yelling, "Die." The moment Hawke raised his eyes, his gaze was cold and he slapped him directly. Boom, boom, boom. Zio-Hi's head started spinning as fast as clockwork in an instant. It spins faster and faster. The more you turn it, the tighter it gets. Until the neck, which had been twisted into a pretzel and could no longer be sustained, was torn apart from the neck. Dong. Hawke looked down again at the driver, who lay sprawled at his feet, his face still contorted in a ferocious expression, and a mocking smile appeared on his lips. "I really intend to let you go." "Pity. The bad nature of your skin color is too strong. Fear power, not virtue. I gave you the only chance in my life to be soft-hearted, but you thought I was scared." Hawke thought about it, and his eyes then fell on the headless corpse that was bleeding continuously because it had lost its head plug. He wasn't lying. He had genuinely been considering letting the driver go. It wasn't just because he had important business there and didn't want killing the driver to cause unforeseen complications and affect his future plans. The most important reason is another one. Bottom line. Just as Hawke said before, once the bottom line is broken, he can't imagine what he will become in the future. Killing is like a valve. Once this valve is opened, life will no longer be revered. This is especially true for those who travel through time and space and already have a flexible moral bottom line. The previous Zeta soldiers were different. After all, Hawke had seen the true appearance of the Chitauri soldiers, and those Chitauri soldiers might look like humans, but they were essentially bugs. Humans will not feel guilty about killing bugs, and Hawke will not give his principles and bottom line to a group of intelligent bugs. But the little black guy in front of me is different. In fact, it was just as Hawke thought. Although this was Hawke's first real murder, he did not feel any discomfort in his heart when he looked at the bleeding headless corpse in front of him, and he did not even have the slightest psychological activity. Wrong. There are also. This seems to be no different from the Chitauri being killed. Hawke thought to himself and subconsciously closed his eyes. It didn't occur to him to close the valve again. There are only 0 and countless times for anything. Now that the valve of killing has been opened, whether he is willing or not, at least from today on, killing will no longer be rejected by him. Think about it. Hawke turned around and stopped looking at the head that fell on the ground and the headless corpse that was bleeding beside it. After opening the car door and getting in, he glanced up at the blue sky, then got in the car, stepped on the accelerator, and drove off the road. He had no interest in digging a hole for this little black guy. The valve of killing has been opened, and there is no possibility of anything else happening. In this case, whether Zio-Hi's body is discovered or not is not a problem for him. Killing one is killing. So killing one more or killing a few more is just a matter of quantity. But you can kill. You can't be bloodthirsty. A truly strong person always maintains a humble heart. Hawke thought silently in his heart, and after driving the taxi out of the remote road, he found the right road with just a glance, and then drove towards the town of Quantico, which was still some distance away. He just doesn't have a driver's license in this life, but that doesn't mean he can't drive. As Hawke's car drove out of this small road where few people would pass by normally, the road gradually returned to its former silence and remoteness. About half an hour later, the sound of footsteps once again broke the silence of the remote path. Then the second and third ones. Soon, 3 men wearing sunglasses came to the trail, their eyes fixed on the head in the mud and the headless corpse that was no longer bleeding. End of this chapter. Chapter 30, Gwen installed a locator on Hawke. Chapter 30, Gwen installed a locator on Hawke. Hawke did not drive a taxi into Quantico, but instead took a ride with someone else. Because when he was still more than 10 kilometers away from the town, he drove the taxi into the water and then walked towards the town along the road. But he was lucky. After walking about a kilometer, Hawke met a female military dependent who lived in the town and had just returned from purchasing supplies. After learning Hawke's destination, the female military family member enthusiastically invited Hawke to get in the car. Hawke didn't refuse. After the vehicle entered the town, there was no scene where the female military family member discovered that Hawke was a newcomer and invited him to stay at her house. The female military family member dropped Hawke off at the door of a clothing store in the small town. Hawke then walked for a while and successfully arrived at a motel in the small town. Although he didn't have a car, a motel doesn't necessarily require a car to stay. No car, just money. After paying the room fee, Hawke successfully got the room key. After going up to the second floor, he came to the door of his room. Before entering, he turned his head and took a look. The entrance to the Quantico base was right in his sight, not even far away. The base was guarded by soldiers. Vehicles and pedestrians who want to enter must stop and be inspected. Hawke just glanced at it and then looked away. It's too late today. Go again tomorrow. Scouting during the day. Attack at night. Then, with the wind blowing hard, even if the driver's body is found, it will probably be a long time before Hawke is identified. After all, it was just a driver who died. If this happened in a certain country, it might be a big deal, and the case might be solved overnight. But there are plenty of drivers here. Hawke estimated that by the time law enforcement agencies found him, he might already be wearing his holy clothes. That time, I'm invincible, you can do whatever you want. And Hawke didn't think he would be found. Tell a joke. The security camera at the airport taxi pickup area was broken. Hawke saw it clearly when he got into the car, and the only surveillance camera that could have captured him getting into the car was beheaded. This is why he was too lazy to collect the driver's body. On the one hand, it doesn't matter, and on the other hand, it's based on his understanding of the efficiency of the federal law enforcement system over the past decade or so. The federal law enforcement system is relatively independent. Simply put, if you committed a crime in New York City and were fingerprinted, and then you committed a crime in California and left fingerprints, California would most likely not be able to confirm your identity through fingerprints. Because the fingerprint data of law enforcement agencies in different states are not interoperable. Not to mention, Hawke has been a law-abiding person in his life and has no criminal record at all, so there is no fingerprint data of him in the New York City database. Therefore, even if law enforcement officers found Zio High and found his fingerprints on him, they would not be able to find him through the fingerprints. After half an hour, Hawke boxed on the spot, and after throwing 10,000 punches into the air in the room today, he went into the bathroom to take a shower. After a while, when he came out of the bathroom, he saw the ringing phone on the bed. Just as he picked it up, before he could see the caller ID clearly, the phone screen automatically went black and the ringtone disappeared. What? Out of battery. Hawke was slightly stunned, thought about it, and didn't take it to heart, nor did he think about finding a charger to charge his phone. Just like he had never used a cell phone before. He has no one in this world who cares about him, and likewise, no one cares about him. And so, Hawke shrugged, put the phone aside, and threw back the quilt before lying down. Go to sleep, I have to do serious work tomorrow. Hawke thought. In less than 3 minutes, he had fallen asleep smoothly, and faint snoring sounds could be heard in the room. New York City. Gwen, in her room, frowned as she heard the phone's switched-off message the next time she called. She put her phone down, rested it against her chin, placed her hands on the keyboard, opened a website, glanced at her verification code, and entered it. Quickly. A map appeared on the computer screen. There's a blip on the map. But on this map, the light spot shown is not where Gwen is currently, nor is it even where New York City is. But, D.C. How did Hawke's phone end up in Washington, D.C.? The phone couldn't have been stolen. Gwen thought to herself. She swore she wasn't tracking Hawke. Just when she returned home, a text message was sent to her mobile account, indicating that her phone's location had left her usual place, New York City, and appeared in another place, hence the text message reminder. Gwen then remembered something. When she gave her own mobile phone to Hawk, although she cleared the data on the phone, it seemed that the mobile phone account was not logged out. Hawk didn't ask, so she always thought she had withdrawn. At the moment, when Gwen saw that Hawk's phone had last refreshed its location in Washington, D.C. before it turned off, the first thing she thought of was that Hawk's phone had been stolen. After all, there are still quite a lot of thieves in New York City. Wrong. Not quite a lot, but a lot. Gwen remembered that her first cell phone was stolen from somewhere within 3 days of her purchase, and she instantly felt resentful. Forget it, I'll give him one when school starts. Gwen shook her head, closed the mobile phone positioning website, and looked at the electronic newspaper displayed on the website again. This is a newspaper that appeared after the Battle of New York. There are also illustrations. An illustration shows a Jackson Heights neighborhood that was nearly razed. Gwen used the mouse to control the web page and browse the relevant reports. At this time, there were footsteps in the corridor. Gwen came back to her senses. Next second, her eyes lit up and she thought of something. She closed the web page, then stood up from her chair, ran to the door and opened it. Father. George, who would routinely report to his daughter that he was safe every time he returned home, was startled when he saw Gwen suddenly open the door with her eyes shining. George then smiled and shook his head, saying, "I don't have any latest Spider-Man intelligence to share with you today. Recently, a Spider-Man appeared in New York City who likes to wear a uniform, mask, and do justice everywhere." The NYPD was furious. In a word, if New York vigilantes are useful, what are the police for? But everyone, except the NYPD, found it very novel. The media were very happy and thought they had found the latest hot spot. Netizens were also very excited, and various forums were gossiping about Spider-Man's identity. Gwen was also curious, especially since she has a sheriff as her father. But Gwen shook her head and said, "Dad, I'm not interested in Spider-Man." George smiled. "So yesterday you. That's Mary Curious, not me." Gwen interrupted quickly, then got down to business, blinked, and looked at George. "Dad, can I ask you for a favor?" End of this chapter. Chapter 30, One Hawk Solo at Quantico Base. Chapter 30, One Hawk Solo at Quantico Base. The next day, early morning, Hawk put on his clothes, went to the front desk of the motel, took out $30 from his pocket and handed it over. One more day. Room key. Give. Hawk handed over the room key. The hotel staff took the key, looked at the room number, completed the registration, and then handed the key back to Hawk. Hawk took back the key, said thank you, and turned to leave the hotel. It doesn't take a while. He came to the Quantico base, the mountain road next to it. Hawk was not worried that his morning jog would attract the attention of the soldiers at the base, because besides him, there are other residents living in the town of Quantico who are jogging along this mountain road in the morning. Hawk, wearing a baseball cap, followed the group of runners slowly and without attracting any attention from the crowd. Soon, when he ran to a bend, Hawk looked at the crowd in front of him who had not noticed him, as well as the crowd behind him who had not caught up yet. Without any hesitation, he accelerated instantly. With a whoosh, by the time the runners behind him caught up, Hawk had disappeared. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the forest beside the mountain road. It was already afternoon when Hawk showed up again and returned to the motel. After returning to his room, Hawk sat on the edge of the bed and took a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. The paper unfolds. Into the eye. A simple topographical map of the interior of the Quantico military base has been created. Barracks, office building, tank depot, airport, and also abandoned laboratory. Hawk spent a morning figuring out his destination, and then spent another afternoon quickly traveling through the forest near the base to find 3 evacuation routes for himself. However, he has not yet decided which specific evacuation route to choose. But it is not important. It's enough to have an evacuation route. When the time comes, we can just react accordingly after things are done. Hawke thought to himself, then looked again at the topographic map on the paper which he had marked with symbols that only he could understand, and then he tore the paper into pieces. He did not throw it into the trash can in the room until even the most professional people came and could not restore it. Soon, sunset. At this time, Hawke returned to the motel front desk, returned the room key to the front desk, completed the checkout procedures, and walked out of the motel. This is a motel. Some people checked out within 10 minutes after checking in with their female companions, and the front desk staff also saw this. So the front desk was not surprised by Hawke's early checkout. After leaving the motel, Hawke found a nearby pizza restaurant, ordered a pizza, and sat by the window to eat. We can't go hungry when a war is about to start. It would be too tragic if you were too hungry to run away in the middle of a fight, or if you were caught while running away because you were too hungry to run. Night has fallen completely. Hawke, who had eaten and drunk his fill, also ran through the dense forest under the cover of night at a speed so fast that he could even make a sonic boom, like a ghost. He soon arrived at the high-pressure protective net of the military base. Hawke didn't rush in, but looked up at the towering sentry tower in the military base. On the sentry tower, the searchlight turned on at night illuminates the designated range, scanning automatically and slowly. The moment the searchlight swept over, Hawke pulled down his hood and hid himself behind a tree. I had already used the baseball cap when I was running this morning, so just in case, it's not suitable to be used again. But this black hooded jumpsuit works. He found it in the trunk before driving the taxi into the river. Hawke put the outfit on after leaving the pizza place. Soon, the searchlight left the area of the tree where Hawke was hiding. Next second, Hawke didn't hesitate. The moment he emerged from behind the tree, he bent his right knee slightly. The moment the mud under his feet sank, he took off silently like a rock, flew over the protective net that an ordinary person could not fly over, and landed in the base. Once we enter the base, the rest will be easy. It's nothing more than finding an abandoned laboratory, digging it up, and then running away. Hawke already had a plan in mind. So after landing at the base, Hawke drove according to the plan, quickly passing through the dark area at the edge of the base and heading towards the abandoned laboratory he had already discovered. 1 minute later, an abandoned laboratory surrounded by iron sheets and guarded by soldiers at the only entrance and exit instantly came into his sight. Hawke stood quietly about a kilometer away from the destination, using a container casually placed on the grass at the base as a cover, and watching the 2 soldiers in his sight. Cull. Ready. Hawke, with his eyes closed, slowly exhaled a breath, then slowly opened his eyes and looked at the destination in his sight. Next second. Boom, the moment the grass splashed under Hawke's feet, with a loud bang like a sonic boom, Hawke rushed out like a cannonball. The 2 people who are in charge of the security of the abandoned laboratory today are chatting and laughing. The 2 of them thought today was just another ordinary day. Until the 2 seemed to see something out of the corner of their eyes, and then they heard a sonic boom exploding next to their ears. Boom, boom, the 2 soldiers didn't even utter a cry of surprise. They rolled their eyes and fell to the ground. Hawke still didn't kill them. He knocked the 2 soldiers unconscious in an instant and then rushed into the abandoned laboratory. Next second. Shet. Who? After drilling through the iron sheet, Hawke couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he saw 2 soldiers standing in front of the test building with a dilapidated outer wall that looked like it had been hit by an explosion. Good guy. As for there are already soldiers outside, why put 2 more inside? Is it necessary? Hawke was speechless. When he was exploring the terrain during the day, he could only see the outside of the iron sheet and had no way of seeing the inside. The 2 soldiers were shocked when they saw Hawke, who was wearing a hood and a medical mask on his face, and then they reacted. Next second, the 2 soldiers pulled the trigger directly. Enemy attack. Sound the alarm. Dujijido. In an instant, a sharp alarm that pierced the silence of the night resounded over the Quantico military base. The moment the two soldiers pulled the trigger, Hawk's figure instantly disappeared from the spot. When he appeared the next second, he had already appeared in front of the two soldiers who attacked him. The two soldiers outside just now did not pull the trigger. Can survive. These two. Hawk had a blank expression on his face, and his right hand shot directly towards the two soldiers in front of him with stunned expressions. End of this chapter. Chapter 32, Hawk and #039S Speedrun. Chapter 32, Hawk's Speedrun, 3rd update. Please continue reading. Beep. 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 The moment the shrill alarm sounded over the Quantico military base, no matter whether it was the soldiers on duty in the base, or the soldiers who returned to the barracks to rest, or the soldiers who had already run to the town to rest, all had expressions of surprise and astonishment on their faces. Next second, they reacted. Thick and Greasy's IT. Combat alert. Enemy attack. Jesus Christ, what's going on? The Japanese have launched another sneak attack. No, this is Quantico, not Pearl Harbor. The soldiers were stunned, but after they came to their senses, they quickly entered combat mode. This is Quantico, after all. It's where the Marine Corps base is located, not to mention the FBI Academy and Langley headquarters are nearby. Almost 3 seconds after the battle alarm sounded, the first soldier quickly appeared, followed by the second, the third. Crash. Where? Gamma Labs. Fake. When a lieutenant colonel heard that the former Gamma laboratory had been invaded, he immediately cursed, put on his clothes and ran to the door, while taking out his phone and making a call. The call was answered quickly. Hey. A deep voice came from the other end of the phone. General, Gamma Labs has been invaded. On the other end of the phone, General Thaddeus Ross, who had just left the Pentagon and got into his car, was stunned when he heard the news over the phone. Good guy. He heard something. Gamma Labs was hacked. How is this possible? The Gamma Lab is located in the Marine Corps base at Quantico. How the hell could it be invaded there? General Thaddeus Ross, who was reluctant to believe the news, was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but say something. Tell me again, where was the invasion? Gamma Labs. Shit. Thaddeus Ross was completely heartbroken. What happened? The emergency response team is already there, and I'm on my way. Thaddeus Ross took a deep breath, loosened his tie, and patted the driver's seat. Quantico, hurry. The driver nodded, stepped on the accelerator, and started racing right under the noses of 2 Capitol police officers not far away. The 2 Capitol police officers saw this scene and looked at each other. At the same time, the base's emergency response team has also arrived at the Gamma laboratory, surrounded by iron sheets. There were constant rumbling sounds inside the Gamma laboratory, and at the same time, the secret experimenters who had been in the Gamma laboratory were running out with panicked looks on their faces. The moment they ran out, the soldiers who arrived pounced on them and grabbed them aside like chickens. What's going on inside? How many intruders are there? What do they want to do? I don't know anything. One, he went for the Gamma Stone. The emergency team leader looked at the experimenter, who revealed the information and fell silent. Several other soldiers also looked at the experimenter with disbelief. You just said, one, yes, just one. The experimenter still had a look of terror on his face, but he's not human. He broke the wall with just one punch, and the bullets couldn't hit him at all. The soldiers who shot at him were all killed. Everyone looked at each other. At this moment, a soldier who ran out, supported by the experimenters, looked only injured but not dead. He echoed at this time, what he said is true. There was only one intruder. The emergency team leader's eyes instantly fell on the soldier who was supporting him. Soldier, report the situation. Just as he said, there was only one intruder. He seemed to be here for the Gamma Stone. Our bullets couldn't hit him at all. He killed every soldier who shot at him almost instantly. How about you? Didn't you hear what I said? The injured soldier, seemingly having a mental breakdown, yelled at the emergency team leader. He killed every soldier who shot at him. In fact, he also fired a gun at that time. But his gun suddenly jammed at the moment of firing, and no bullet was fired. It was precisely because of this that Hawke did not take his life at the last moment, but instead broke one of his legs, rendering him unable to fight. But the other soldiers who fired the guns and the experimenters who were armed with guns inside were not so lucky. Just as Hawke said before, once the valve of killing is opened, killing will no longer be a matter of choice, but only a matter of quantity. But Hawke still restrained himself. At this moment, Hawke has arrived at the basement of the Gamma laboratory building. The first thing he saw was the hole dug in the basement. A thud. Hawke, wearing a hood and a medical mask, jumped straight into the cave. Followed by, he saw a dugout passage. The not-so-spacious passage still had stone pickaxes and other tools left on the ground. Wow, that's so primitive. Wrong. It must have been intentional, after all. Not all members of the military are united. Hawke thought to himself, and his eyes fell on the stone walls on both sides of the passage. That's right. This was the stone he had seen in Dr. Connor's laboratory. At this time, in Hawke's microcosm, after a phoenix cry sounded in the microcosm, a message was conveyed to Hawke. Swallow. I'll leave it to you to refine. That's easy. Hawke digested the information. He originally thought that he would also have to play the role of a miner and mine these stones that, for some unknown reason, had absorbed gamma rays after the explosion in the Gamma laboratory. Result: all you have to do is put your hand on it and burn your own microcosm so that the phoenix in the microcosm can absorb the Gamanion stored in the stone. This. Awesome. Hawke's face lit up with joy, and he was ready to absorb it. But just as he was about to take action, his eyes suddenly fell on the entrance of the hole he had just jumped out of. Hawke punched directly into the air towards the cave entrance. Rumble, the hole leading to the basement, collapsed under his punch. Under the power of this punch, smoke and dust accompanied by shock waves instantly swept through the excavated but not very deep passage. But the smoke and dust could not affect Hawke at all. He did this mainly because he didn't want the people above him to disturb his next work. Now it's okay, you can absorb it with peace of mind. Hawke thought to himself, and without hesitation, placed his hands on the stone walls on both sides. Next second, the small universe explodes. Boom, boom, boom. End of this chapter. Chapter 33, Hawke snatches and runs away. Chapter 33, Hawke snatches and runs away. How many seconds does it take for a building to collapse? The answers vary. But here, in the military base of Quantico, the Gamma laboratory building, which had already been damaged by the Gamma explosion that Bruce Banner encountered, could no longer hold on and began to collapse after a huge explosion suddenly came from underground. In less than 5 seconds, the 3-story Gamma laboratory building was completely reduced to ruins. The smoke and dust roared and clanged against the surrounding iron sheets. The iron sheet made a rumbling sound when it was hit. The soldiers of the emergency response team who were about to rush in to kill the invader quickly retreated. Looking at the experimental building that had turned into ruins in the blink of an eye, they were silent for a while and swallowed their saliva at the same time. Without him, because if they had gone in a few seconds earlier, they would have been buried along with the Gamma laboratory. But after being shocked and relieved, the team members all turned their eyes to their captain. Number 1, what now? How the hell should I know? After a moment of silence, the emergency team leader said speechlessly, "Let's pack up." The team members were stunned. What? Oh, it's already collapsed. What else can we do? Dig out the invader's body. The emergency team leader rolled his eyes. He thought it would be a fierce battle. Result? I never thought that. Well, it would start well but end badly. At this moment, the lieutenant colonel who had just called General Thaddeus Ross to report also arrived here in a jeep. Number 2, pack up. Yes. The emergency team leader said something to his deputy, then casually walked towards the lieutenant colonel, grabbing the assault rifle he was wearing with both hands. The lieutenant colonel didn't wait for the emergency team leader to salute. His eyes fell on the Gamma lab building, which had become a ruin and was still sending up clouds of dust. What's going on? The emergency team leader shook his head. To be honest, I'm not very clear, but I'm certain there's only one intruder. The emergency team leader then repeated what the experimenters who ran out of the building knew, and then talked about how he encountered the building collapse just as he was about to lead his team in. The lieutenant colonel's expression became dull when he heard that there was only one intruder. Are you sure just one? Yes. The lieutenant colonel cursed subconsciously, feeling a bit absurd at the same time. No, it's just one person, how dare he do that? It's not like Quantico hasn't experienced intrusions before. But the overseas elements came in groups, and most of them were captured before they even entered the real gate of the base. But no matter what, everyone knows that Quantico base is a team dungeon. Good guy. You came here alone, what do you think? The lieutenant colonel found it difficult to understand. The emergency team leader also spread his hands, then turned his head to look at the collapsed Gamma laboratory building and thought of a possibility. Maybe this is a suicide mission. The other party's target is this laboratory building. When they came here, they didn't even think about going back. Hearing this, the lieutenant colonel thought about it and nodded. That's the only explanation. Grass. I even informed the general. If I had known, I wouldn't have done so. After nodding, the lieutenant colonel's expression suddenly changed. He remembered the anxious call he made to General Ross when he came here, and he felt unwell. If he had known the intruder was committing suicide, he would never have called. At least I wouldn't be in such a rush to call. Now look what's happened, I have to make another call. The lieutenant colonel thought to himself and sighed. While instructing his deputy next to him to notify the base control room to lift the alarm, he took out his phone again and called his superior, General Thaddeus Ross. The call was answered quickly. Report. General, the invader is dead. Died. General Thaddeus Ross, who was urging his driver to rush to Quantico, was stunned again. What happened? The identity of the intruder is currently unknown, but he was alone. The Gamma building collapsed, and it's currently speculated that he was attempting suicide. Boom. Thick and greasy's IT. Just as the lieutenant colonel was organizing his words to report to General Thaddeus Ross, suddenly, a loud bang once again rang out from the ruins of the Gamma building. Next second, he saw the ruins that the searchlight was aimed at the moment. After a loud bang, a figure seemed to rush out from the ruins and was completely stunned. The emergency team leader, standing nearby, exclaimed in disbelief. But he reacted quickly. Enemy attack. Shoot, shoot. Thump, 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 thump. After the emergency team leader reacted first, the other emergency team members who were just about to pack up and leave also reacted. They instantly pointed their guns at the figure standing in the ruins, looming in the smoke, and pulled the trigger. At the same time, the invasion alarm that had just been lifted at the base sounded again. The shrill alarm at this moment made the soldiers who had just gathered and dispersed look confused. What's the situation? The alarm was just lifted. Why is it ringing again? Just when they were wondering if the base control center had pressed the wrong button, the sudden sound of gunfire made them realize one thing. Shit. Another invasion. Hurry up. Thump, 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 thump. Hawk's figure kept flashing back and forth above the ruins of the Gamma experiment building. Under the ruins, the last ray was pulled into the bag by his own small universe. Hawk then looked ahead at the soldiers who were constantly shooting at him, and at the soldiers not far away who were rushing towards him. As well as the tanks rumbling towards this side, and the armed helicopters slowly taking off with the sound of rotating propellers. Obviously, this has completely stirred up a hornet's nest. But I have finished my work. Next, I just need to find a place to spend this harvest. Hawk thought to himself, then looked at the smoke and dust that was gradually dispersing around him, raised his eyebrows, and without any nostalgia, turned around and bent his knees. At that moment, as the ruins under his feet collapsed again, the whole person rose into the air like a cannonball. Next second, tracked by the searchlight, he drew a graceful parabola in the air and landed in the forest outside the base with a whoosh. All right. The quick victory task has been completed, and it is time to move on to the next task. The wind is blowing hard. End of this chapter. Chapter 30, Hawk is in the sight of General Ross. Chapter 30, Hawk is in the sight of General Ross. By the time General Thaddeus Ross arrived at Quantico, the invasion alarm had been sounded. Okay. This time it was really lifted. But things did not end there. On the contrary, the base command center was brightly lit at this moment. This time I'm really embarrassed. Someone not only easily invaded their base, but even destroyed one of their buildings and got away with it. The most important thing, they have now lost track of the intruder. What do you mean by lost? Lost in the dense forest 20 kilometers south of the base. Where's our helicopter? At night, in the dense forest, our helicopter couldn't descend at all. Shit. The lieutenant colonel pounded the table angrily. Send out all our men, including the helicopters. We must find this damn guy. The deputy quickly responded and trotted off. Just as the lieutenant colonel stood with his hands on his hips, looking at the first-person perspectives of the helicopters and the search teams sent out on the big screen, a deep voice came from behind. The lieutenant colonel shuddered and turned around subconsciously, then saw General Ross, whose face was as dark as ink. General, there was only one intruder, and you were able to lose him. That's fine. General Ross said this with a forced smile. The lieutenant colonel opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. Instead, he asked the soldier sitting at the computer to check the footage of the invaders fleeing. General Ross looked at the big screen. Into the eye. The intruder standing in the smoke could not be seen at all under the illumination of the searchlight. Then he jumped into the forest and disappeared quickly. General Ross was stunned by the scene. Next second, he looked at the lieutenant colonel. You just said that only the Gamma building was invaded. The lieutenant colonel nodded quickly. Yes, General. Not long after this intruder entered, the Gamma building collapsed. We originally thought he was the bomber, but just as I was reporting the latest situation to you, he suddenly jumped out from under the rubble. General Ross did not speak, but listened quietly to the lieutenant colonel's report while having someone repeat the surveillance footage of Hawk jumping out of the base. Single player, clear target, Gamma building, inhuman dodging ability, amazing jumping ability. General Ross's eyes flickered. Did any other cameras capture the intruder? The technical team is investigating the surveillance. Have you located the intruder? Without. The lieutenant colonel subconsciously glanced at his deputy who had just returned. After seeing the deputy shake his head, he was silent for a moment. Then he reported to General Ross he disappeared in the dense forest 20 kilometers south of our base. We are still looking for him. General Ross nodded upon hearing this. Next second, he didn't say anything, but just walked outside. Send someone to dig up the Gamma building for me as quickly as possible. The lieutenant colonel shuddered and quickly stood at attention. Yes. But having said that, by the time the large machinery arrived, cleared the rubble, and dug out the bodies buried there, it was already dawn. The helicopter, which had been flying all night, had returned to base. However, while the pilot was resting, the helicopter was not. After replacing the pilot and filling up the fuel, the helicopter took off again, radiating out in all directions with the base as the center, trying to find the trace of the invader who was so arrogant last night that he almost stepped on their Quantico Marines. The same goes for the soldiers at the base. The soldiers who returned last night were resting and were replaced by another group of soldiers, who also dispersed into the dense forests surrounding the base. It looked like they were going to search for him for 3 days straight. However, General Ross did not go back to rest, but sat in the car not far from the ruins of Gamma building, leaning against the back seat, squinting his eyes slightly. At this time, the adjutant sitting in the driver's seat, after receiving a phone call, nodded a few times and turned to look at General Ross, who was resting in the back seat. General, the director of SHILD is calling. General Ross slowly opened his eyes, reached out to take the phone handed to him by his adjutant and put it to his ear. "I'm Ross. General Ross, I heard Quantico was quite lively last night." The gloating voice on the other end of the phone gave General Ross a headache. "Talk about it, Nick." At the headquarters of SHIELD, Nick, wearing a black windbreaker and a black eye mask, sat in his seat, admiring the scene on the computer screen in front of him of Hawk leaping out of the base. He laughed out loud when he heard what General Ross said. "How about a joint operation?" "You're thinking." General Ross chuckled. "This is a military case. I'm warning you, Nick, don't interfere. And if I remember correctly, your authority seems to have been frozen." "Say it." General Ross didn't even bother to listen to the answer from the black-salted egg on the other end of the phone. It was just nonsense anyway, so he simply hung up the phone and handed the phone back to his adjutant. After sitting up straight, he rubbed his brow and asked, "Have you found any whereabouts?" The adjutant shook his head. "No, sir." Hee. General Ross didn't seem surprised by the result. He chuckled twice, shook his head, and changed the subject. "Has the Gamma building been dug up?" "It's expected to be another 10 minutes. Walk." Hearing this, General Ross opened the car door and walked down. "Go and take a look." Seeing this, the adjutant quickly opened the car door and chased after him in 2 steps. At this moment, all the bodies of the soldiers buried in the Gamma building have been dug out and are lying in rows not far away. The way they died. Each has its own merits, but they all have the same thing. The expressions on the faces of the corpses, whose faces are still mostly intact, are finally fixed on astonishment, horror, and disbelief. General Ross glanced at the bodies and said to his adjutant, "Have the base file a report. I'll approve the maximum pension." The adjutant nodded to indicate that he had taken note of the matter. Soon, 10 minutes passed in a flash, and the hole that was originally buried under the rubble was dug open again. The base experimenters who had been on standby nearby walked back into the underground passage. "Gone. It's all gone. It's unbelievable. Did he absorb everything here? Jesus Christ, why didn't he turn into a monster like the Hulk and the Abomination?" After a while, waves of exclamations of disbelief came from inside. General Ross's eyes lit up. "Adjutant." "Sir." "Find him at all costs." "Understand." End of this chapter, Chapter 35, The Phoenix Constellation Successfully Illuminated. Chapter 35, The Phoenix Constellation Successfully Illuminated. Please continue reading. General Ross's face was expressionless. But the heart is full of waves. After he verified his guess from the experimenter's mouth, a figure emerged in his mind. Captain America, Steve Rogers. To date, he is the only creature that has taken the super soldier serum and possessed the strongest combat power known to mankind. The military has never given up on replicating the super soldier serum. But since Abraham Erskine was attacked and killed, the true formula of super soldier serum has disappeared into history. But one thing is certain. The real super soldier serum requires gamma radiation. This is also the fundamental reason for the birth of Hulk. Bruce Banner was a military scientist before. While studying gamma rays and super soldier serum, he accidentally triggered a gamma ray explosion, which led to the birth of Hulk. This gave General Ross hope, even if the Hulk is uncontrollable. But for now, a human being with absolutely no inhuman features, inhuman reaction speed, extraordinary strength, and jumping ability. Gamma rays disappeared completely. General Ross is now certain that the invader came for gamma rays. These 3 pieces of information combined all tell General Ross one thing. This is the super soldier he is looking for. And so, find him at all costs. General Ross subconsciously clenched his right hand as he looked at the Gamma laboratory that had become a ruin. His eyes were not filled with any anger, but were filled with endless excitement. Hawk had no idea that he had been targeted by General Ross, who once chased Bruce Banner around the world. But even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Because Hawk has left Quantico, and is no longer even within the Washington, D.C. area. Hawk is now at the foot of a waterfall. Rumble, the water of the waterfall, rolled down like thunder, and then crashed into Hawk, who was sitting cross-legged in the water with his eyes closed and only wearing a pair of shorts. But when the pouring water hit Hawk like falling rocks, it seemed to be vaporized in an instant, and endless white mist emerged from Hawk's body. This is Maryland, deep within Cunningham Falls Conservation Park near Thurmont. Off the beaten track, Hawk has been able to come here for more than 20 days. For more than 20 days, Hawk, who placed himself under the waterfall, has only been doing one thing: burn your own little universe. In the small universe. At this moment, it seemed as if the Phoenix constellation map carved above his own small universe was shining brightly, and the shadow of the Phoenix rising from the ashes was looming in the Phoenix constellation map. He was in no rush to return to New York City. On the one hand, it was not yet time for summer school to start, and on the other hand, he planned to let things take their course for a while. Such as, Hawk wanted to see if the people of Quantico could find him hiding there after he had caused such a commotion there. If not, it wouldn't be too late for him to return to New York City. But if you find it, don't be afraid. He specifically chose this place. It's surrounded by primeval forest for 5 kilometers around it. It's a remote and untouched area, perfect for murder. The little black guys are afraid of power but not morality. If you want to make them surrender, you can't use morality. You can only use killing. Kill them until they are scared and timid, and then they will surrender naturally. The same is true for the military. There is something to say. When the U.S. military accuses you of having weapons of mass destruction, you'd better actually have them. Why? Because if you really have it, the U.S. military will not dare to really attack you. But if you pretend you do, the U.S. military is about to crack down. And so, Hawk had chosen this place, a place unlikely to be visited by ordinary people, as his imagined battlefield. He would wait for the military to come, start a fight on the spot, scare the military into submission, and then return to his own New York City. But more than 20 days have passed. Not to mention the military figures, Hawk didn't even see the figure of an ordinary person. But it doesn't matter. Hawk chose to stay here not just to wait for the military to find this place. At least that was not his main purpose. He was attracted by the waterfall here. Hawk intends to use the waterfall here to help himself break through in one fell swoop and completely light up the Phoenix constellation map in his own small universe. Hawk sat cross-legged in the water with his eyes slightly closed, tempering himself with the help of the waterfall water pouring down with the sound of thunder. Over the past 20 days, during the day, he used the resistance of the waterfall water to continuously swing his fists. At night, he closed his 5 senses and sat cross-legged in the water. While using the waterfall water that flowed continuously for 24 hours to temper himself, he used the opportunity of closing his 5 senses to try to find an opportunity to touch his 6th sense. To be precise, the bronze saints cannot be called true saints. Except for the 5 little strong men. Only a saint who has awakened his 6th sense and truly mastered it is qualified to be called a true saint. Hawk didn't expect to awaken and master his 6th sense now. That's not realistic. He just thought that since he was free anyway, it would be great if he was lucky enough to touch the edge of his 6th sense during this period. The 6th sense is a good thing. The saints who have awakened their 6th sense and the saints who have not awakened their 6th sense are completely different beings. Above the 5 senses, once the Saint Seiya awakens and controls his 6th sense, he will have infinite possibilities such as being able to control elements, predict the future, use telekinesis, fly, perform illusions, etc. It is precisely because of this that the saints who awaken and control their 6th sense are worthy of being called true saints. Pity. Not to mention awakening, he hasn't even found the door to his 6th sense. Hawk in the water slowly opened his eyes, then stood still as a mountain, ignoring the pressure of the waterfall pouring down, and slowly stood up from the water. Hawk's blood was boiling, heat waves were rolling, and bursts of white smoke were rising from his body. And in this boiling white mist, the fiery red Phoenix shadow was looming behind Hawk. Yes, Phoenix. Although he had been here for more than 20 days, Hawk had not waited for the military, nor had he found the door to the sixth sense. But the main goal he set was achieved. Hawk has now successfully lit up his first constellation, one of the 48 bronze constellations. Phoenix next moment. Hawk looked at the waterfall falling in front of him and threw his first punch, starting his mission of throwing 10,000 punches a day. End of this chapter, Chapter 36, The Encounter Beneath the Upside-Down Waterfall. Chapter 36, The Encounter Beneath the Upside-Down Waterfall. Please read on. One punch. One punch. Another punch. Standing under the waterfall, Hawk used his pure body to resist the impact of the water, while firmly swinging his fists under the resistance of the water. Every time he threw a punch, the cross-section of water that came into contact with his fist would pause for a brief moment, less than a second. But not enough. He didn't want the waterfall to pause for his fist. What he wanted was the water of the waterfall to tremble under his fist, or even flow backwards. Hawk felt that his demands were not high. After all, the waterfall in front of us is not the Lushan waterfall. If we compare this waterfall with the Lushan waterfall, it is probably not even 1/10 as majestic as the Lushan waterfall. So is this excessive? That's not too much. But it was obvious that his idea still made the waterfall in front of him angry. What level you let me flow back? Do you think you are Poseidon? And even Poseidon, the king of the sea, can't do it. He is the king of the sea and controls the sea water. How can he control my freshwater waterfall? And so? The waterfall was angry, and under Hawk's persistent punches, the speed of the water flow increased almost at a speed visible to the naked eye. Hawk felt the waterfall, which was now becoming angry, with an expressionless face. But in the microcosm, on the completely illuminated Phoenix constellation map, a fire phoenix was slowly emerging. He decided he will leave when the waterfall in front of him reverses, even though it's only a few days until school starts. But it doesn't matter. Again, he is an orphan. I guess no one will care about him even if he doesn't go to school after school starts. But that's fine. No one cares about him, and he has no one to care about. And so, the fighting spirit in Hawk's eyes burned brightly. Bring it on. The waterfall was completely enraged, and the water flow became even more rapid and violent after Hawk's provocation. Boom! Is there thunder? At the very edge of Cunningham Falls Nature Reserve, north of Hawk's waterfall, Gwen, who had just entered the Nature Reserve forest, heard a roar coming from afar and subconsciously looked up. But the primitive trees that blocked out the sun blocked the sky, and only sunlight shone in through the gaps between the leaves. However, the mottled light spots added a bit of weirdness to the already quiet forest. When Gwen saw that she could no longer see the sky, she withdrew her gaze. Gwen, wearing a conspicuous white windbreaker and a pair of outdoor sports shoes, took out her mobile phone, turned on the screen, and looked at the location map that appeared on the screen. Into the eye. Although the two spots of light were far apart, they were already visible on the same screen. One of them shows where Gwen is currently located. Another one. Gwen took a deep breath, grabbed the trekking poles he had bought after arriving in Thermont yesterday afternoon, encouraged himself in his heart, and walked towards the direction of another light spot. At first, Gwen thought Hawk's phone was simply stolen and didn't take it seriously. After all, she is also busy working a summer job. But the next day, Dr. Connors suddenly asked whether she had given the gift to Hawk. Gwen felt a little strange, so she went to Hawk's new apartment again after get off work. Result: the envelope she had placed on the sofa was still lying quietly on the sofa, without even moving. For some reason, Gwen suddenly felt her heart panic at that moment. She immediately called her father, George, hoping that her father could see if he could find Hawk through the New York Police Department. George didn't think much of it at first, but seeing Gwen's worried face, he thought for a moment and decided to inform his colleagues at the Queen's Precinct. His jurisdiction was in Manhattan, and it was possible to investigate a missing person outside the Queen's precinct, but he still needed to inform his colleagues there. The result was that no such person existed. Hawke seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Hawke also didn't have a credit card or a driver's license, and his cell phone wasn't sure if it was stolen or had run out of battery, so he couldn't find it. To put it bluntly, Hawke is like a transparent person living in modern life. No family. No socializing. I don't even have a friend. Even after my colleagues at the Queen's Police Department filed a case, they didn't know where to start the investigation. Because no one could provide the last place Hawke was seen, and even after asking several of Hawke's classmates, no one cared to ask what happened to Hawke. Except for Gwen. Until the day before yesterday, George, who had just returned home, looked at his daughter who had been coming home later than him these days and had been out looking for Hawke. He finally couldn't help but ask the question he had always wanted to ask. Gwen, are you in love with this Hawke? Gwen, who had just returned from a cemetery in Queens, was stunned when she heard George's words, and then gave an answer. Dad, Hawke and I are just friends. By the time George came to his senses, Gwen had already run upstairs. George blinked and couldn't help but look at his wife Helen, who was standing beside him, without saying a word. Friend, do you believe that? It doesn't matter whether I believe it or not. Helen, who had always been a good wife and mother, smiled at Gwen's back as she went upstairs, and then said to George, "But I know you can't keep your daughter." George was confused. Gwen returned to her room and threw herself on the bed, thinking about Hawke, who had not been heard from for more than 10 days. Just when she had an indescribable feeling, her cell phone suddenly rang. Gwen lit it casually and glanced at it. Next second, she sat up suddenly from the bed. This message was not a spam message, but another remote login message sent from her mobile phone account. Gwen quickly clicked on the text message link. This time, the signal was no longer within an approximate range, but was accurate to a specific location. The bottom of a waterfall in Cunningham Falls National Park, Maryland. This is also why Gwen is here. Soon, as the sound of flowing water got closer, Gwen, who was already sweating profusely, became more energetic and even quickened his pace. And under the waterfall, after Hawke had delivered the 9,999th punch, he retracted his fist and threw the final punch. The phoenix shadow behind him seemed to be real. Next second, Hawke threw out his 10,000th punch, and the phoenix behind him spread its wings and flew high. Chirp. Go against the current. Boom. The waterfall in front of me is no longer a waterfall plunging 3,000 feet, but an angry dragon raising its head, rolling back the sky. At this moment, time seemed to stand still. But an extremely clear voice passed through the forbidden time and appeared in Hawke's ears. Sound. Clear. Trembling. Hawke. End of this chapter. Chapter 37 Gwen, and quot, I can always find you if I want to and quot. Chapter 37 Gwen, I can always find you if I want to. The upturned waterfall hangs between heaven and earth, like an endlessly flowing Milky Way that has been forcibly solidified in the air by divine power. Countless broken water droplets were floating and spinning around Hawke as he stood under the reverse waterfall. It was like surrendering to Hawke. Scared. Maybe it felt that the voice it spoke was too loud just now, so the waterfall didn't even dare to make a sound. All is silent. Only the sound of Hawke coming from behind him made Hawke, who was shirtless and with his chest heaving slightly, shudder all over. Hawke subconsciously turned his head to look. Into the eye. He saw Gwen walking out of the forest not far away. She was wearing a windbreaker. Although her blonde hair was messy and her forehead was covered in sweat, the blue eyes she looked at him were full of surprise. Gwen. Hawke froze in place for a moment. He was in disbelief. Good guy. He never expected that the first person to come here and find him was not the military from Quantico, but Gwen. But how is this possible? Hawke was a little disheveled, and at this moment, the still time seemed to restart. Rumble, the waterfall that was originally flowing backwards, also recovered at this moment, but the sound of the waterfall falling was much smaller than before. It seems that the waterfall is also afraid that its loud noise will cause unnecessary disaster. After all, Hawk can really make it go against the current. At the same time, after seeing Hawk standing under the waterfall, Gwen also started running, although she didn't understand why she ran when she saw Hawk. But she just wanted to run. In just a blink of an eye, Gwen had jumped into the pool of the waterfall and waded to Hawk's front. Next second, she hugged Hawk. Hawk subconsciously hugged Gwen in his arms and used his back to protect Gwen from the impact of the waterfall. At this time, he also reacted, and with a whoosh, his figure disappeared into the pool. When he appeared again, he was already holding Gwen on the shore next to the waterfall pool. White mist rolled out like smoke from Hawk and Gwen, who had just been wetted by the waterfall in his arms. Just the blink of an eye. Under the surge of Hawk's powerful energy and blood, Hawk and Gwen, who were wet a second ago, have now lost all the moisture and returned to a dry state. After this moment, Hawk lowered his eyes to look at Gwen, who was holding him tightly in his arms. He opened his mouth, intending to wonder how Gwen had found him when the military in Quantico couldn't find him. But Hawk looked at Gwen, who had closed her eyes and even snored faintly in his arms. He opened his mouth, thought for a moment, and did not speak. Instead, he sat down on the ground and put Gwen in his arms. He didn't say anything, but lowered his eyes to look at the sleeping Gwen, looking at the messy blonde hair next to Gwen's face. After stretching out his right hand paused slightly in the air, then recovered and tidied up the messy blonde hair next to Gwen's face. About half an hour later, Gwen slowly opened her eyes. Because she was so familiar with sleep, she thought she had woken up in bed and subconsciously stretched. Next second, she saw Hawk looking down at her, eyes facing each other. Gwen blinked instinctively. Hawk smiled. "Hello, honey." With a cry of surprise, Gwen rose from Hawk's arms. At this moment, Beige's face became a little pinker at a speed visible to the naked eye. Hawk also stood up from the ground. The moment he stood up, his limbs kept making comfortable stretching sounds. He had been motionless for fear of waking Gwen up, and now he was finally able to move. Gwen now withdrew her gaze from observing the surrounding environment, and then refocused her eyes and locked them on Hawk, who was only wearing a pair of shorts in front of her. Hawk in front of him had a figure like an ancient Greek sculpture, and the pair of sword-like eyebrows above his blue eyes showed his unruly nature. The sword-like eyebrows are still the same sword-like eyebrows. The difference is that, if Hawk's sword-like eyebrows before were like those hidden in a scabbard, then Hawk's sword-like eyebrows now are like a sharpened sword that has been pulled out of the scabbard. Gwen was stunned for a moment. Next second, she reacted and looked at Hawk, as if she had thought of something, and a beautiful smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Library reading Ha. Hawk raised his eyebrows, catching the hint of resentment hidden under Gwen's teasing. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Sorry." Gwen smiled. If Hawk heard a hint of complaint in her teasing, Gwen also heard something else in Hawk's apology. For example, Hawk had apologized to her before, but she could feel that Hawk's apology was just for the sake of apology. But now the corners of Gwen's mouth curled up slightly, and she stretched out her little hand towards Hawk. Hawk was slightly stunned. Gwen said, "Give me your phone. Why aren't you answering my call?" Hawk realized what was happening, walked to the side, took out his phone, which was placed on top of his neatly folded t-shirt, and handed it to Gwen. "I've been here for over 20 days, and it's long since run out of battery." Gwen was slightly taken aback when she heard this and took the phone. "Really?" "The phone won't light up." "But..." Gwen blinked as if she had thought of something. She grabbed Hawk's phone with one hand, took out her own phone with the other, and clicked on the link in the previous text message. "The link is broken." Gwen was stunned as she looked at the link on the screen that had just existed, but was now invalid. At this time, Hawk finally asked the question he had always wanted to ask. "By the way, Gwen, how did you know I was here?" Gwen came back to her senses and calmly put her phone back into her pocket. Then she handed the phone back to Hawk with a smile on her face. "My dad is the sheriff, Hawk. As long as I want, no matter where you are, I can find you." Hawk blinked. These words. He would have to be crazy to believe that. But looking at Gwen, whose face turned pink again after she said this, Hawk thought for a moment. A look of realization appeared on his face, and then he nodded. Forget it. If he was curious about how Gwen found him when he first saw Gwen, he was no longer curious now. Okay. Not curious just now, when Gwen fell asleep in his arms. Maybe it's just like Gwen said. She's the sheriff's daughter, and she can find herself wherever she wants. That's what Gwen said. Hawk chose to believe this setting. End of this chapter. Chapter 38, The Cabbage brings the wild boar here. Chapter 38, Cabbage brings back the wild boar 5 o'clock in the afternoon. New York, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, also known as JFK International Airport. Sergeant George Stacy of the 19th Precinct of the New York Police Department was pacing back and forth near the station exit, feeling like he was going crazy. Good luck. The cabbage that I raised with great effort was finally targeted by the wild boars outside. And it was a wild boar. But this is not the point. The point is, judging from the current situation, it seems that it was the little cabbage that he raised who took the initiative to find the wild boar. George said it was difficult to understand, but that was no longer the point. At this moment, George had only one thought in his mind. He wanted to shoot the wild boar that had kidnapped his cabbage. At this time, passengers began to disembark on the flight arriving in New York from Hagerstown Regional Airport in Maryland. George, who was pacing back and forth, took a deep breath at this moment, stood at the exit and looked inside. Next moment, his breathing became rapid again. Jesus Christ. He saw something. My precious daughter is holding hands with a wild, handsome wild boar who came from nowhere. George's face darkened instantly. The other people standing by to greet the guests seemed to feel a chill, glanced at George subconsciously, and then instinctively moved away from him. At last, after getting off the plane, the couple who had just confirmed their relationship also felt the strong chill coming towards them. Gwen subconsciously glanced in the direction where the cold came from, and then her little hand released Hawk's right hand with a snap. It's Daddy. Hawk also immediately saw Sheriff George Stacy standing at the exit. He was wearing a black suit and had a righteous look on his face, but at this moment he exuded a cold aura. Eyes facing each other. He could see the wariness and scrutiny in the look Sheriff George Stacy cast upon him. This is understandable. Hawk felt that if it were him, he would be even angrier than George Stacy if his daughter ran out without saying a word and came back with a man. Breaking the wild boar's legs would be considered a light punishment. What, now the wild boar is himself? Oh. That's fine. Hawk thought to himself, but he is still a little curious about how he and Gwen ended up holding hands. The memory is very confused. But he is very happy. Again, it's not that Hawk has never thought about falling in love, especially with Gwen Stacy, Marvel's most recognized girlfriend. But he didn't have the confidence before. But now he has. Not only is there, but it's huge. In the next step, he collected all the meteorites, got vibranium from Wakanda, and tinkered with his phoenix cloth, which became even bigger. And so, Hawk looked at Gwen, who had already trotted over to George Stacy and was holding George's arm. His expression did not change. He kept looking at George, walked in front of George, and extended his right hand first. "Mr. Stacy, this is Hawk. I'm sorry to have worried you." George didn't say anything, nor did he shake hands with Hawk. He just took a look and ignored Hawk, looking at Gwen beside him. "Let's go, Helen is still waiting at home." "Father." "It's okay, Gwen." Hawk withdrew his right hand with a normal expression and said to Gwen, "Go back with Mr. Stacy first." He understood George. Not only would George not shake hands with him, even if he wanted to attack him, he would at most dodge and would not fight back. After all, who made him a wild boar? So, after Hawk finished speaking, he smiled slightly at Gwen again, then said goodbye to Mr. Stacy along with George, and left on his own without making things difficult for Gwen. After an hour, Hawk returned to his apartment in Queensboro Bridge Park. Turn on the lights. He originally thought that since he hadn't been back for more than 20 days, he would see a dusty room. Result: there was hardly any dust, and even the shorts he had previously hung outside the window were now neatly folded and placed on the sofa. There was an envelope on top of the neatly folded shorts. This should be the letter that Gwen mentioned on the phone, which Dr. Connors asked her to help deliver. Hawk thought to himself, sat on the sofa, picked up the envelope, and took out a handwritten letter inside. This is a letter of recommendation from Dr. Connors to New York University. Hawk then remembered that Dr. Connors's doctorate seemed to be from New York University. Hiss. This gift is quite heavy. Hawk blinked. To be honest, this gift is indeed substantial. Although Dr. Connors' fame can only be considered icing on the cake is still icing on the cake. As for this letter of recommendation, other people probably won't be able to get it even if they want it. After all, in the West, the meaning of a letter of recommendation is actually a favor transaction. And so, if Hawk had received this letter of recommendation before he awakened his cosmos, he would definitely be very happy. But for now, Hawk no longer cared whether he could go to NYU. But he has never thought about giving up studying. It can only be said that he is now calmer. If I get it, I am lucky, but if not, it is fate. After all, he has now seen another different and more exciting and colorful future. But no matter what he thought, he still had to call Dr. Connors to express his gratitude for the letter of recommendation. Hawk turned the envelope over, and there was Dr. Connors' number written in Gwen's handwriting. He took out his cell phone from his arms, looked at the black screen, laughed, stood up from the sofa, and walked into the bedroom. In the bedroom, Hawk connected his phone to the charger and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the phone to turn on. Then he caught a glimpse of the photo frame on his bedside table out of the corner of his eye, which seemed to have been moved. Hawk raised an eyebrow and reached out to readjust the position of the photo frame, placing it diagonally toward the head of his bed. Without him, he likes to sleep on his side. If the photo frame is placed like this, there is a 70% chance that he will see the photo frame the first thing he sees when he opens his eyes every day. Get it done. After Hawk rearranged the picture frame, he smiled slightly, then looked at his turned-on phone and called Dr. Connors. The call was answered quickly. I'm Curtis. Dr. Connors, it's me, Hawk. Hawk introduced himself and apologized that he had been out for a trip some time ago and had just returned, which was why he saw the recommendation letter. Dr. Connors on the other end of the phone seemed very happy. Hawk chatted with Dr. Connors on the phone for a few words, then casually asked, Dr. Connors sounds very happy. Was the experiment successful? Dr. Connors laughed. It's almost there. There's a lab rat that gives me hope of victory. Well, congratulations in advance, Doctor. Thanks, all right, Hawk. I'm going to get back to work. Okay, you go ahead. Have a nice weekend. Please collect, please read, please do everything. Tomorrow will be a big update. End of this chapter. Chapter 39, Lemon Sea Bass. Chapter 39, Lemon Sea Bass. Real or fake? Success. After Hawk finished talking to Dr. Connors and hung up the phone, he felt amazing. After all, he originally thought that because there was only Spider Emperor in this world, but no amazing Spider-Man, Dr. Connors' regeneration experiment was unlikely to succeed. Never thought. Hawk stood up and walked out of the bedroom, thinking about the conversation he had just had with Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors was in a good mood, so he revealed some details to Hawk. For example, in the mouse experiment just now, it was originally thought that this experiment would end in failure like the previous one. The result came unexpectedly. After a little white mouse was injected with lizard serum, although the vital signs disappeared at that time, they reappeared after a while. Moreover, the little white mouse had escaped from prison due to an accident last month, causing its tail to be severed. After the vital signs reappeared, the tail grew back at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dr. Connors was therefore very excited by this discovery. Hawk felt it was amazing, but it was only a momentary magic. Hawk left the bedroom, sat down at his folding table, opened the computer he'd bought from Sky for $500, a computer originally used by a beautiful woman, and then put the matter out of his mind. Rather than whether Dr. Connors' experiment was successful, he was more concerned about what was happening at the Quantico base. Soon, after Hawk searched for some information online, his expression became strange again. No invasion. Only drills. This is a newspaper in Washington, D.C., which reported that an intrusion alarm had occurred at the Quantico military base. But in the newspaper, the base's spokesperson denied the invasion, saying that it was just a routine exercise that night. However, they never expected that during the exercise, a building collapsed and more than a dozen soldiers died in the exercise. Okay. Quantico had turned everything into a drill. This is also normal. Again, that was Quantico, the home of the Marine Corps. Next door was the FBI's Federal Police Academy, and next to it was the CIA's Langley headquarters. In this case, no matter what, the military base would definitely not admit that it had been invaded. As for the rest, Hawk looked around but didn't find any useful clues. Even with regard to the body of the young Hai, he did not find any words that could be connected to it in any related reports. Either that or the body of young Hai hasn't been found yet. Or maybe the death of young Xiao Hai was not worthy of the media's attention at all. After all, every day, many black guys die for various reasons. It is normal for a black guy who wants an identity but has no identity to die without even a bubble. Hawk thought about it, shook his head, closed the computer, got up and went into the bedroom to prepare for bed. The next day, Hawk was woken by the phone call. Hawk opened his eyes while lying on the bed and saw the photo frame coming towards him. He then stretched out his right hand and grabbed the phone that was charging on the bedside table. Hey, go downstairs. Hawk's computer was down for less than a second. Then he got up from the bed, put on his t-shirt, walked to the living room window, opened it, and saw Gwen standing across the street next to the yellow Corolla and waving at him. Oh, wrong. It should be my girlfriend Gwen. He still felt a little unbelievable. Say it again. Gwen Stacy is my girlfriend now. Hawk thought to himself, smiled and waved to Gwen standing downstairs, then hung up the phone and walked towards the door. A short while later, Hawk appeared at the door of the apartment building, crossed the street, and came to Gwen. What happened? Are you free tonight? My mother invites you to dinner. Lemony sea bass. This was the first thought that flashed through Hawk's mind when Gwen invited him to dinner at her house. After all, this dish can be said to have a long-standing reputation in a sense. Hawk's thoughts turned, and he looked at Gwen's expectant eyes in front of him. After thinking for a while, he nodded. It is good. It's settled then. What are you going to do later? Well, let's go to the library and read. After saying this, Hawk looked at Gwen, who was silent but smiling at him, and laughed out loud. I'm really going to the library to read this time. After all, school starts tomorrow. It's grade 12, the last year of high school. If nothing unexpected happens, someone from New York University will come this semester to conduct the final inspection and confirm the scholarship. Although he said he didn't even care whether he could go to New York University. But, if possible, he still wanted to go. After all, studying law at New York University and then finding a way to become a district attorney or even a judge was his dream before he awakened his inner universe. And he had been working hard on this matter for the past 3 years. Gwen looked at Hawk seriously, then a bright smile spread across her face. Let's go then. Where? Aren't you going to the library? I happen to be going to the library too. It's perfect. You can take me home after reading, but you have to accompany me to Osborn Bioindustries first. Boarding. Hawk looked at Gwen, who walked to the driver's seat, opened the door and beckoned him to get in while talking. Without hesitation, he opened the passenger door and got in. Just like he just said, he really planned to go to the library to read and study today. It's a combination of work and rest. Within the microcosm, the Phoenix star chart manifests as a phoenix, its vibrant colors, absorbed from the Quantico base, roaming freely within the Phoenix star chart. Phoenix was still concentrating on refining Gamanion at this moment. Hawke and Gwen spent the entire day coming out of Osborn Bioindustries and arriving at the library, where they stayed quietly reading books. He wants to go to New York University. Gwen wanted to go to Berkeley. Okay. Both of them are working hard for their future. In the afternoon. Before leaving, Hawke registered and took away the book he had not finished reading. When he walked out of the library, Gwen was already waiting in the car. A man who had just quickly gone in to borrow a book and came out screamed in pain when he saw a parking ticket stuck on his windshield wiper. Hawke watched this scene, got into the car, and asked curiously, "Didn't you get a ticket on your car?" Gwen shook her head and smiled. "Dad registered my license plate into the police system." Hawke suddenly realized. End of this chapter. Chapter 40, Gwen and #039, S2 brothers. Chapter 40, Gwen's two brothers. Manhattan, Goring Apartments. Helen Stacy, who has been a good wife and mother at home since marrying George Stacy, is preparing dinner in the kitchen. 9-year-old Howard Stacy and 8-year-old Simon Stacy, Gwen's two younger brothers, were sitting in the living room, catching up on the TV. Yes, every second counts, because once Helen has time, she will urge them to study. In Helen's words, "Your sister Gwen is such a good student, and since you two came from the same womb, you two should be good students too." But in fact, Howard and Simon's grades cannot be said to be very bad. It can only be said that they have been hovering around the passing line, and sometimes they will fall if they are not careful. This is not. Howard and Simon failed their year-end exams this year, so Helen simply cut off 1 hour of their daily entertainment time. At this time, the doorbell rings. "Howard, Simon, you should go back to your room and read." "All right." Helen walked out of the kitchen, glanced at Howard and Simon sitting on the sofa, said something lightly, and then walked to the door and opened it while watching Howard and Simon walking obediently towards their rooms on the second floor. Hawke stood at the door and looked at Helen, who appeared in front of him after the door opened. Her first impression was very gentle. He smiled and greeted her. "Good evening, Mrs. Stacy." Helen was stunned when she opened the door, and then she warmly invited Hawke into the house. "Good evening, Hawke, come in." Hawke said thank you, and was then pulled into the house by Gwen. This was the first time Hawke visited someone else's home in this life. Gwen's apartment is also on the top floor, and it is a duplex structure with 2 floors. The area is not very large, but wherever you look, it gives people a warm and tidy feeling. Hearing the noise downstairs, George Stacy, who was in the study on the second floor, walked down the stairs with a serious face. Gwen, who was downstairs taking Hawke to quickly familiarize herself with her mother, heard the footsteps and looked at George coming down. "Dad." When Hawke saw George, he greeted him politely, "Mr. Stacy." George looked serious and meticulous, just like a serious leader. But this time, it's much better than yesterday. George at least nodded, and then walked towards the dining table without saying a word. Helen looked at her husband and shook her head in amusement, then said to Hawke, "Hawke, come sit down, it's time to eat." Hawke thanked him again, then, led by Gwen, nodded and smiled again as George, who was sitting across from him, sat down. Helen then shouted towards the second floor. "Howard, Simon, come down to dinner." "Coming." Howard and Simon, who had been waiting for this moment in the room with their books, ran down from the second floor and were slightly stunned when they saw the stranger in the restaurant. They continued to stare at Hawke even after sitting down in their seats. Hawke noticed and extended his right hand towards Howard. "Hello, Howard, my name is Hawke." "My name is Howard." "My name is Simon." 8-year-old Simon stood up from his seat and stretched out his little hand to shake Hawke's hand. He looked at Hawke and blinked. "Are you my sister's boyfriend?" Hawke subconsciously glanced at George, who was sitting opposite him. "Really?" George's face now looked like the black man's. Very dark. But he didn't object. Hawk smiled slightly and nodded to Simon, who had blonde hair like Gwen. Yes. George's face darkened even further. Gwen smiled and reached out to rub her brother Simon's head. Well done, bro. She decided to give her brother $10 as a reward before going to bed tonight. As for Howard, he didn't. Unlike the Eastern style of dinner, Gwen's family's dinner is a very clear and typical American style of separate meals. Of course, this could also be what George Stacy meant. No matter what, Hawk is an outsider. Unless they are very familiar with each other since childhood or have been here many times, otherwise, if they come for the first time, they basically won't use the shared dining system. Hawk could understand. But even though we ate separately, I have to say that dinner was indeed delicious. In this life alone, this was the first time Hawk had eaten a dinner that felt most like dinner. Not to mention the food in school. When Hawk is alone, he doesn't pursue anything, as long as he is full, because living is already difficult. On the table, George ate his dinner in silence, just like the head of the family. Helen was like a gentle matriarch, always concerned about whether Hawk liked the food and asking some simple questions. Gwen acted as a mediator between her boyfriend and her mother, while also acting as a vigilant guard sitting across from her father George, fearing that he would suddenly lose his temper. 9-year-old Howard and 8-year-old Simon were busy eating their own meals. They ate happily. At this time, George grabbed the whiskey on the side, took a sip, coughed, and cleared his throat. Next second, Helen and Gwen's eyes instantly fell on George. Coming, Hawk said to himself, and turned his gaze to George, who was sitting opposite him and had been watching his every move out of the corner of his eye. Just as George was about to speak, Helen met Gwen's pleading look, smiled inwardly, but still spoke first. By the way, George, tell us about your work. Did you catch Spider-Man? George glanced at Helen, then glanced at Gwen with a half smile, and finally set his eyes on Hawk. Not yet, but we will. After all, he is an outsider, and he has left us a lot of clues. Done. George didn't give Helen and Gwen a chance to interrupt. He looked at Hawk with a smile and said, By the way, Hawk, what do you think of this Spider-Man who has appeared recently? Do you also think he is a so-called vigilante? Gwen placed her left hand under the table and grabbed Hawk's thigh lightly. Hawk received Gwen's implicit reminder, laughed, and shook his head. Sir, I've been in Maryland these days. I just came back yesterday and went to the library to read all day today. To be frank, I'm still a student, so my only concern now is whether I can get a scholarship to NYU so that the bank can approve my loan application. As for that Spider-Man, I don't care if he's a vigilante or some hippie criminal trying to get attention. End of this chapter. All right, legends, that's it for today. If you're ready for the next chapter, smash that like button and flood the comments right now. Remember, we've got 3 days to prove this story needs to continue. Subscribe so you don't miss the drop, and I'll meet you in the next audiobook.